After the Myriads took a moment to pay their respects and grieve the Supreme Commander's death, Brett Stewart opened the letter that the Supreme Commander had left for him. In the letter, Travis Adams appointed Brett as his successor, warned the Myriads to prepare for an upcoming clash, and ordered them to sever all ties with the Herbalist Society for attacking him. Roger Knott and an old man then led the Myriads in greeting Brett as the new Supreme Commander. Suddenly, 3 envoys stood up in protest. They were not convinced of Brett's worthiness to lead them. "Brett Stewart, how can you be our new Supreme Commander? You don't deserve to be Travis Adams' successor," Viola Garcia loudly protested. She was quite displeased. Other than Viola Garcia, the other envoys who stood in protest with her were Alan Baker and Clark Robinson. Clearly, none of them liked him. In the past, they didn't agree with the decision to name Brett as deputy leader, feeling that they deserved the position way more than he did, given their level of strength and experience. However, since Travis Adams had always taken a liking to Brett's talent, the 3 of them held back their true sentiments out of fear of the former Supreme Commander. Now that Travis Adams had passed away, they were no longer afraid to express their disapproval. When the other members of the Myriads heard this, they were shocked. Some of them even started whispering to each other. "What do the 3 of you mean? Are you trying to go against the will of the former Supreme Commander?" Milton Brown, the old man who had stood up with Roger Knott earlier, questioned them coldly. What right did the 3 of them have to oppose this?
"Mr. Brown, please don't understand. Viola Clark and I agree that Brett's strength level is too low to be a Supreme Commander. If he is simply allowed to inherit the position, it'll cause a lack of confidence among our members."
Alan Baker looked at Brett mockingly, as if he was certain that he would easily be able to defeat him if they were to engage in a battle. "Then who do you think should become the next Supreme Commander? The 3 of you? If we were to use the same logic, none of you would be worthy either. I won't stand for this. You're clearly just using this as an excuse to draw support from the other members. What if we kick the 3 of you out of the 12 envoys?" Roger Knott stood up with a gloomy expression on his face and berated them.
"Mr. Knott, what do you mean? The 3 of us have never offended you."
Clark Robinson's brows began to furrow. Although Clark had a great amount of influence in the Myriads as one of the 12 envoys, his position didn't reflect how strong he actually was. At the same time, even though Roger Knott and Milton Brown were both considerably more powerful than most Myriads members, they were only in charge of leading the Enforcers and the Protectors. So while there was no shortage of powerful people in the Myriads, this didn't factor into their positions within the organization and vice versa. "Actually, it doesn't matter if you offend me or not, but the former Supreme Commander has already chosen his successor. If you wish to oppose his will, I'll make sure that you all die on the spot today." Roger spoke very casually, but no one present dared to doubt the gravity of his words.
"Mr. Knott, you are an elder of the Myriads. Even if the Supreme Commander doesn't have to be the strongest person here, I'm sure even you can admit that Brett's strength level is too low to be a worthy successor. In the future, our enemies will definitely make fun of us having such a weak leader,"
Alan argued. "Besides, what's the use of him being resourceful? The Supreme Commander should be the one to lead the charge and break through enemy lines during a battle. If he can prove it in front of everyone today and beat me in a fight, I'll definitely follow his orders from now on." Viola fearlessly took 3 steps forward. "What the hell are you trying to do?" Roger Knott flew into a rage. "You're only one of the 12 envoys. How dare you offend your superiors and demand a fight with the Supreme Commander? Do you have a death wish or something, Viola?" "I just want to prove a point. If Brett's strength is insufficient against someone like me, then it's difficult to convince the masses that they have a capable leader. Even if I kneel down before him today, other people might be unwilling to accept his mediocrity in the future. There are so many members of the Myriads. How can he lead them if he can't even defend himself?" Viola continued to walk slowly towards Brett. Hearing this, the expressions of the surrounding members changed. Almost all of them thought that what Viola was saying was reasonable. A powerful organization really needed someone who could prove that he was strong enough to lead it. Roger Knott and Milton Brown were also in a dilemma. If they continued to let Viola act recklessly, and if she were to handily defeat Brett, how many Myriads members would still confidently look at him as a capable leader in the future? At the same time, although it wouldn't be difficult for them to kill the three envoys, doing so would undoubtedly be an admission of Brett's weakness and prove that they had a valid point. "Defend yourself!" Viola let out a disdainful snort as she threw a right hook at Brett Stewart. Roger Knott wanted to intervene and block the punch, but Milton Brown grabbed him by the shoulder to prevent it. He simply shook his head at Roger Knott as they both frowned deeply and looked on helplessly. Brett had no time to dodge Viola's fist at such a short distance, and his face immediately turned pale at the sight of the attack. Many of the Myriads members closed their eyes when they saw this scene unfolding. With Brett's blood about to splash everywhere, he was clearly outmatched by Viola, wasn't he? The corner of Viola's mouth revealed a proud sneer. However, just as her fist was about to hit Brett's cheek, Kevin suddenly moved in front of her. With lightning speed, he grabbed her wrist to instantly prevent her strike from landing. "How dare you lay a finger on the Supreme Commander right in front of me?" Kevin declared coldly with an expressionless face. "Where did you come from? Do you want to die too?" Viola furiously pulled her arm away and quickly extended her leg to kick Kevin in the head. "Kevin!" Brett couldn't bear to watch this. While he knew that Kevin was very good at fighting, Viola was a powerful force. "It's all my fault." Brett Stewart's body started trembling violently. All of a sudden, a loud thud resounded across the entire venue as everyone looked in shock. Kevin had managed to dodge Viola's kick and gave her a spinning kick of his own that landed right on her chest. This sent her flying in the air before crashing into a pillar, causing her to spurt out a mouthful of blood. Struggling from the blow and wincing in pain, she was unable to get back up. "Kevin!" Brett Stewart's anxiety turned into excitement. He thought that Kevin would surely die at Viola's hands. He never knew how strong Kevin had become since their last encounter. "Brett, don't worry. No one can touch you as long as I'm here today." Kevin casually brushed off some dust on his shoe without showing any sign of worry. After a brief moment of shock, Alan and Clark finally came back to their senses. "Where did this guy come from? How dare he interfere in the affairs of the Myriads?" Alan scolded. With that, both Alan and Clark rushed towards Kevin at the same time. "Over my dead body?" Dalton, who had been watching the entire time, suddenly swung at them with both of his hands. Before either of the two could react, Dalton delivered a left hook to the side of Alan's head and struck Clark's jaw with a right uppercut. With all of Travis Adams' energy flowing through him, Dalton's forceful strikes were so powerful that he instantly killed them both with one blow. Seeing this, the entire venue fell silent. Who would have thought that the three envoys who held high positions in the Myriads wouldn't even be able to withstand a single strike from Kevin and Dalton? "May I ask, what is your name, young man?" Milton Brown curiously asked. "My name is Dalton Steele of Chicago, and the former Supreme Commander Travis Adams is my mentor," Dalton revealed as he brought out his infinity dagger. "Nonsense! That's impossible!" Viola uttered as she managed to stand up from the ground with trembling legs. "I've been in the Myriads for 20 years, but I've never heard of the Supreme Commander mentoring any student." "Just because you've never heard of it doesn't mean that it isn't true. After I found the Supreme Commander and tried to save his life, he asked me to join the Myriads and take him as my mentor before he passed away." Dalton glanced at Viola indifferently. Viola was furious. "What proof do you have? Take it out. If you don't have anything to show for it, then you're just trying to deceive everyone." Viola then turned her attention to Brett. "I can't believe you, Brett. How dare you call an outsider just to help get you promoted? And you even got him to invent this touching story about the Supreme Commander's final moments? You should be ashamed of yourselves." "What the hell did you just say?" Dalton couldn't hold his temper any longer. Are you getting angry because I managed to expose your scheme? I wonder how much he paid you. Viola leaned against the pillar and burst into laughter. Brett, you're so full of tricks. How can we acknowledge you as our leader if you keep relying on others to do your job for you? Even if you kill me today, there will still be thousands of doubting members that you'll have to deal with in the future.
If you dare to say one more word, I won't hesitate to kill you,
Dalton warned. He hated people like Viola who liked to stir up trouble without any good reason. How could she question his connection with the former Supreme Commander like that? Please step aside. Milton Brown quickly intervened between them. This is an internal matter of the Myriads. We'll take it from here and handle this ourselves. What the hell do you mean by that? Kevin slowly walked forward. Since Dalton was under the former Supreme Commander's tutelage, it means that he should be part of this discussion. And who are you to say that? Milton Brown took a deep look at Kevin and was confused. You really don't know me? Perhaps you should recognize this token in my hand. Kevin pulled the Night King's infinity pendant out of his pocket. It can't be, is that? Milton Brown looked at the pendant in shock, then quickly turned his head back to Kevin. He immediately took a few steps back in disbelief. When Dalton revealed his connection to the former Supreme Commander, Viola accused Brett of relying on outside help in fabricating a story about Travis Adams' final moments just to be named his successor. Suddenly, Milton Brown intervened, making Dalton and Kevin step aside because this was an internal matter of the Myriads. Feeling slighted, Kevin argued for Dalton's right as a Myriads member given that he was Travis's student. Then he flashed the Night King's infinity pendant to identify himself. Milton was shocked when he saw this. How dare you insult me and call me a bystander? This symbol was given to me by my mentor. Why aren't you kneeling down in front of me? Kevin's eyes suddenly looked cruel as he shouted at them in a cold voice. I'm sorry, Deputy Leader. Please forgive me for not recognizing you. Milton Brown hurriedly knelt on the ground and lowered his head to acknowledge Kevin. While the Supreme Commander was the highest position and head of the Myriads, Brown considered the holder of the legendary Infinity Pendant as his true master. When the others also recognized the symbol in Kevin's hand, including Viola Garcia, they all suddenly knelt down on the ground as well, with cold sweat slowly trickling down from their foreheads. Do you still think this is just your internal matter now? Kevin asked coldly. We will do as the Deputy Leader tells us. Milton Brown felt tongue-tied when he replied. Do you think Brett Stewart is suitable to be the next Supreme Commander? Kevin's gaze quickly swept across the thousands of Myriad members who were present. Yes, Deputy Leader. Everyone agreed respectfully at the same time. Although Kevin looked calm on the outside, he was actually trying to hide his panic deep down inside. After all, this wasn't actually his infinity pendant, but at the same time he was also curious about who the Night King was. Even though the only difference between Brett's Deputy Leader emblem and his own was that his pendant was made of palladium. That alone had been enough to garner such a huge amount of respect in the eyes of the Myriads. On top of that, the higher-ups of the organization seemed to be very wary of him. Supreme Commander Stewart, how do you think we should deal with her? Kevin turned around and asked Brett. Hearing this, Viola took a deep breath. She was so scared that she had forgotten the pain from the blow to her stomach. Her hands were shaking intensely, and there wasn't a trace of arrogance left in her. Supreme Commander, I was wrong to insult you. I'm really sorry. Please, for the sake of the organization, let me go this time. I've worked hard for the Myriads all these years. Viola walked up to Brett Stewart and held her head low as she begged him for mercy.
Why are you suddenly begging for mercy now? Where's the arrogance you showed earlier?
Dalton held out his infinity dagger as he asked her.
Are you still questioning my identity now?
I'm really sorry. I won't dare to question your authority ever again. Viola's face was extremely pale as she began to cry in fear. After glancing at her, Brett took a deep breath and said,
"Kevin, let her go. After all, despite her arrogance, she's worked hard and made some contributions to the Myriads over the years."
"As you wish, Supreme Commander." Kevin smiled as he nodded. "All of you, listen up. While the Supreme Commander was kind and generous enough to spare Viola's life, she and the others committed actions that can't be tolerated by the Myriads. I hope this will be the last time. Anyone who dares to disobey the head of the Myriads will be killed without mercy. Let the two envoys' deaths serve as an example."
"The deputy leader is truly wise. Let's all greet the Supreme Commander once again."
The rest of the members from the Myriads exclaimed fearfully.
"Kevin, you and Dalton have come a long way just to get here. Go and rest for a while. I'll come back to find you two after I take care of the former Supreme Commander's funeral,"
Brett said very solemnly.
"Thank you, Supreme Commander."
Kevin respectfully lowered his head to Brett before leaving with Dalton. Even though Brett treated him like a real-life brother, he deliberately did this for others to see, knowing that this would help to garner respect for the Supreme Commander as well. With that, Brett Stewart once again knelt in front of Travis Adams' coffin. Upon seeing this, everyone obediently followed suit and resumed paying their respects. This brought back a touch of sadness and solemnity in the pavilion. Meanwhile, Kevin and Dalton slowly walked along the island's forest, enjoying the beautiful scenery as if they were on vacation in paradise.
"Kevin, why do you think Brett spared Viola's life?"
Dalton couldn't help but ask. "He did it with the bigger picture in mind." Kevin shook his head lightly. "Although killing her would have established his prestige, she still holds a high position of influence in the Myriads. If all three envoys had been killed, it would have inevitably caused an uproar from the other members. Now that Travis Adams is dead, the strength of the Myriads has been reduced drastically. If the 10 grade schools discover that the rest of its leadership is also in turmoil, it'll inevitably create an opportunity that they'll try to take advantage of," Kevin continued. "Knowing this, the most important reason why Brett spared her is that he wants to show his benevolence to everyone. This way he won't just command fear, but gain respect amongst the other members in the shortest time possible. This includes the other envoys, protectors, and enforcers, as well as elders such as Milton Brown." After that, the two of them didn't talk much as the afternoon passed quickly. That night, Kevin only heard that Brett had already retreated to his room to rest, after being too tired and sad from leading the funeral ceremony and grieving Travis Adams' death. At the same time, inside the Williams family mansion in New York, Ariana Titus slowly opened her eyes and coughed a few times. "Ariana, are you all right?" Kelly Emmett quickly brought a glass of water over to her. "I'm still a little banged up from my injuries. Thanks again. I'm glad you found me." Ariana looked at Kelly with a gratified look. After all, it was all thanks to her that she had been saved in Chicago. "I really didn't expect that piece of trash would be so strong compared to our previous encounter. Could it be that during the time when he was gone, he obtained some medicinal pill that made him even more powerful than before?" Ariana wondered with a slight frown. She was still puzzled after being so easily defeated by Kevin. "Ariana, did you really get hurt by Kevin?" Kelly asked carefully. "Unfortunately, he got lucky," Ariana begrudgingly admitted and then coughed a few more times. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes grew wide as she looked at Kelly. Meanwhile, in a luxurious mansion overlooking the city of Detroit, a beautiful figure sat by the window and soberly looked at the brightly lit skyline. Compared to before, Phoebe now looked a lot more haggard. Ever since she had been brought to the Hayes family household, she had been quietly serving them every day.
"Phoebe, what are you thinking about?"
A magnetic voice suddenly sounded. Then a man slowly walked up behind her and held her in his arms. "Jared, let go of me!" Phoebe struggled to break free from him.
Phoebe, what's wrong with you? You're my fiancé. Can't you let me hug you?
Jared's face immediately darkened. We're not married yet, so nothing's official. Phoebe didn't even look at him. Ever since the collapse of the Hill family, the Hayes family had finally become the most prominent family in Detroit. Their eldest son, Jared, was incredibly handsome and had an impressive resume. And if nothing unexpected happened, he was set to become the heir of the family business. He seemed to be the perfect boyfriend. But why had he remained single all this time? Unfortunately, beneath Jared's squeaky clean appearance was a hidden temper with bad intentions. It was only because of his family's hush money and protection that he was able to maintain a glowing public image. And when Truman Anderson reached out to them again about having Phoebe marry Jared in exchange for a rejuvenation pill, his father, Clifford Hayes, was elated and didn't hesitate to accept his terms.
Are you still thinking about that piece of trash?
Jared sneered as he stared at Phoebe's figure. So what if I am? You don't own me, Jared, Phoebe replied coldly.
Well, you're going to be my wife soon. When that happens, I better be the only man you think of.
Jared's expression suddenly became less pleasant as he slammed his hand on the window.
Besides, I'm the heir of the respected Hayes family. How can you love that useless son-in-law more than me?
When Phoebe didn't answer him, Jared added,
I know that you only agreed to this marriage because you wanted to save him, but that piece of trash isn't good enough for you anyway. He doesn't compare at all with me.
So what if he's just a useless son-in-law? But you're right. It isn't fair to compare the two of you. In my opinion, he's more than 10,000 times the man that you'll ever be. Phoebe wasn't afraid of him at all. These words completely set off Jared's anger. He suddenly rushed up to Phoebe and picked her up against her will.
Tonight I'll show you who's a real man.
Jared, what are you doing? This isn't funny. Let me go. Phoebe didn't expect this at all. She started to get anxious as she struggled to break free. Before anything else could happen, they heard a series of rapid knocks on the door. The room suddenly fell into silence.
Shut your mouth!
Jared covered Phoebe's mouth as tears kept falling from her face. After 2 minutes, the knocking still hadn't stopped. This annoyed Jared.
Who the hell is knocking outside? Are you so stupid that you can't even talk?
A polite voice replied, Sorry to bother you, Mr. Hayes, but your father has asked for you to come see him immediately. Phoebe was relieved by the interruption. In the Hayes family mansion in Detroit, Phoebe was looking more haggard than ever. It was obvious that she was thinking about Kevin, which annoyed Jared to no end, so he confronted her about it. He was angered by her cold responses towards him, and he suddenly grabbed Phoebe against her will. But before anything could happen, Jared was interrupted by someone who kept knocking at the door. Eventually, he answered the door and was told that his father had asked for him to come over immediately to see him.
All right, I'll be right there.
Jared took a deep breath. As soon as he let go of Phoebe, she ran to the other corner of the room and curled up into a ball.
You got lucky tonight, but don't look too relieved. We're still going to get married soon. When that happens, you'll have no choice but to spend the rest of your life with me.
As Jared spoke, he tidied up his clothes from top to bottom and left the room without looking back. Phoebe was scared, but she didn't regret her words or actions at all as her mind slowly drifted back towards her yearning for Kevin. Meanwhile, back at the Myriad's headquarters, the night went by quickly. The next day, Kevin had just woken up when he was escorted to Brett Stewart's room. At the same time, Dalton was also brought over.
Kevin, did you sleep well last night?
Brett, who was sitting on a stool, looked a little drained. It was obvious that he was still grieving and had been unable to have a good night's rest as a result. Brett, how are you feeling? Kevin asked comfortingly.
The death of the Supreme Commander still makes me feel sad, but I know he wouldn't want me to stay this way forever. After all, looking at the bigger picture, his death is just a small part of the Myriad's existence.
Although Brett Stewart sounded very sad, he was much better than the day before. Brett then handed a glass of champagne each to Kevin and Dalton.
I wanted to do this last night, but I was just too overwhelmed from everything by the time the funeral ceremony ended. Anyway, the reason that I brought the two of you over here now is I have a suggestion. Kevin, you know that we're brothers, and Travis Adams was one of my brothers too. Now, since Dalton was mentored by Travis and you already consider him to be your brother, why don't all three of us start treating each other as brothers from now on?
Sounds good to me, Mr. Stewart. I mean, brother,
Dalton happily teased. I have no problem with that either. It's good to have two of my dearest brothers right here with me, Kevin smiled.
Cheers to our brotherhood,
Brett exclaimed as the three of them toasted. As they sat down on a couch, Brett suddenly remarked,
By the way, Kevin, I heard that you ran into some trouble recently?
It's just a small matter. There's no need for you to worry about it. Kevin gently waved his hand.
Detroit is a very nice place. If possible, I advise you to hang on to it,
Brett slyly remarked. Brett, how could you tell what I was thinking? Kevin was surprised.
Hey, I know we're all brothers here, but can the two of you be any more cryptic? What are you guys talking about?
Dalton scratched his head. However, Kevin and Brett didn't dwell on the topic and just laughed out loud at their inside joke. Brett, I can't stay on this island for long. I've decided to return to Chicago today, Kevin said apologetically.
If you have something to do, you don't need to stay. Just remember, no matter what difficulties you may encounter, you can always let me know. Although I can't guarantee that I'll be able to solve them, I'll definitely do my best each time.
After saying this, Brett raised his glass of champagne and the three brothers happily clinked their glasses. After having a meal together, Brett sent someone to quickly prepare a fast boat and send them away without alerting anyone.
Next time you come back, I won't be the weakest one,
Brett said to himself as he watched the boat move farther and farther away from the island. The first thing he did when he returned to his room was to go into seclusion and learn a technique that had been passed down in the Myriads for many generations. Only the Supreme Commander was qualified for it, and now was his chance to finally develop unparalleled strength. When Kevin and Dalton returned to Chicago, a few hours had already gone by. Dalton, what do you plan to do now? Kevin suddenly asked.
The 10 grade schools are just hungry for fame and power. I don't intend to continue studying in our school anymore.
Because of Travis Adams' death, Dalton had a new understanding of what really was going on behind the scenes. So he no longer wanted to be associated with either the Healing Arts School or those so-called righteous organizations. That's good. I have to go to the Herbalist Society Chicago branch now, so I'll talk to you later. Kevin waved his hand and was about to leave.
Wait a minute, Kevin. What are you going to the Herbalist Society for? With your skills in herbalism, you can't possibly be worse than those people. Plus, you know what they did to my mentor.
Dalton quickly grabbed his friend's shoulder. Why was Kevin going to the Herbalist Society? After all, Travis Adams had mentioned that the Herbalist Society was one of the groups that attacked him. Don't worry, I won't join the Herbalist Society, but there are some things that I have to deal with over there, Kevin reassured him.
All right, I understand. As for me, I'll send someone to find my mentor's son. After all, he's his only remaining relative.
This was the last thing that Travis Adams told Dalton to do. It was therefore what he attached the most importance to. Then let's part ways for now. We can go out for a drink the next time we meet. See you, brother. After saying that, Kevin walked off in the direction of the Herbalist Society's Chicago branch.
Take care, brother. I'll definitely look forward to that. We'll drink until we drop.
Dalton laughed out loud. The Herbalist Society Chicago branch was one of the most magnificent buildings in the city. Its ground floor also operated as a pharmacy that was growing in popularity with many people. Although the herbal medicines that they sold to civilians couldn't help them prolong their life or increase their strength, it was definitely a more effective and inexpensive option for treating common ailments such as coughs and colds compared to typical drugstore alternatives from pharmaceutical companies. As he watched the continuous stream of people entering and exiting, Kevin sighed.
Right now, he was still very confused about the true colors of the Herbalist Society. On the one hand, its herbal medicines really helped the public. On the other hand, the organization's ambitions were so outlandish that its leaders were willing to take drastic measures just to get what they wanted, such as going after Travis Adams. Moreover, remembering what the Night King had told him, Kevin could totally picture that there was a more sinister side to the Herbalist Society. Luckily, I didn't agree to Nadia Alexander's request, Kevin thought to himself. If not, he wouldn't be able to face Brett, knowing that he had helped their enemy. Kevin called her on the phone. "Hey, Nadia, where are you? I'm already at the entrance of your Chicago branch." "Kevin, wait a second. I'll come out immediately." Nadia seemed to be caught off guard, but she was pleasantly surprised. Kevin didn't say anything else. Since Nadia Alexander was giving him a chance to meet the most powerful people in the Herbalist Society, he wouldn't dare to miss it because he could provide useful intel for the Myriads. More importantly, by getting to know the faces behind the different herbalist organizations such as this one, it would be easier to carry out the bigger plans he had for the future. Just then, Kevin's phone suddenly rang. It was Miss Wilson calling. After he picked up, Miss Wilson asked respectfully, "Mr. President, are you free right now?" "What happened to the company this time?" Kevin asked hesitantly. "Williams Media is doing fine. However, the Hayes family of Detroit sent someone here to see you," Miss Wilson explained with an uneasy smile. "The Hayes family?" Kevin frowned. "Who did they send? And did you ask them what they want?" "It's the eldest son of their family, Jared Hayes. He wants to acquire a large number of power pills," Miss Wilson revealed concisely. Ever since Williams Media acquired the Booker Phoenix Corporation and the news of them selling over 100 power pills had spread, in just a few days' time, dozens of famous companies across the country had taken the initiative to come and talk about a potential partnership. "I don't need to come over. You can let Jared Hayes know that I won't offer a single power pill to their family. If he asks why, you can tell him that the order came from me." Kevin thought for a while and added, "Also, kindly release another memo to anyone who has bought a power pill from our company before. Whoever dares to sell or give their stash to the Hayes family will no longer have the right to participate in future auctions." After saying that, Kevin hung up the phone. He thought to himself, "I'll make the Hayes family pay for what they did to Phoebe. I guess I didn't have to go to Detroit to take down her fiancé." Meanwhile, in the reception area of Williams Media, Jared leaned back on the couch and looked at the surrounding facilities. Although he didn't think much of Chicago, Williams Media was a leading enterprise. That meant that he had to pay attention to its activities, especially since they had power pills in their hands. With the Hayes family's prominence in Detroit and his own glowing reputation, Jared figured that if he came personally, Williams Media CEO would definitely run out just to meet him.
"If I can get on the good side of their CEO and set up a partnership with them, I'll be able to secure my position as the family's heir. In addition, by taking a power pill, I'll be able to improve my strength to become the most powerful man in Detroit. And once I fly back home, I'll get to marry Phoebe and have a beautiful wife. With everything going for me right now, it feels like I'm about to take a giant step into my future."
Just as Jared was thinking about all of this, the door of the reception area opened and Miss Wilson slowly walked into the room. Without waiting for Miss Wilson to explain the situation, Jared raised his head and said arrogantly,
"What did your CEO say? Do you know how precious my time is? I've already had 2 cups of coffee while waiting. But since I'm in a good mood today, I'll give him another 10 minutes. However, if he still doesn't come out, I'll have no choice but to cancel this potential partnership on behalf of the Hayes family."
"Mr. Hayes, I don't think you need to wait another 10 minutes. You may leave now." Miss Wilson very politely extended her right hand and gestured toward the reception area's door.
"What's the meaning of this?"
Jared jumped up from the couch in shock. "Our CEO said he's not coming to see you, and he has no plans of offering you a power pill," Miss Wilson explained plainly.
What the hell? Is your CEO out of his mind? Does he know who I am? Isn't he aware of the Hayes family's prominent status in Detroit?
Jared sneered as he was beginning to lose his composure. Last night, Jared's father had repeatedly stressed the importance of obtaining a partnership with Williams Media in bringing back some power pills. But now, he couldn't even see their president face to face. Moreover, without a power pill, his dream of taking over Detroit one day would be shattered, wouldn't it? Mr. Hayes, please don't get too upset. Although I may not be familiar with the Hayes family status in Detroit, I know very well that we're currently in Chicago, and you just insulted our company's president. So it's even more impossible for us to offer any power pills to you. Miss Wilson's tone was neither warm nor angry.
Screw this.
Before Jared could finish what he was saying, he saw that Miss Wilson's expression had become far more severe. You may do as you wish, Mr. Hayes, but I have to leave now to take care of more pressing matters. Miss Wilson turned around and quickly left the reception area. If this had happened in the past, Miss Wilson wouldn't have dared to treat Jared this way. But now things are different. Williams Media was now a leading powerhouse in the entertainment industry. Beyond that, the company also had the much-coveted power pill in its hands. This was like having an unbeatable ace in the hole. Jared fiercely punched the coffee table out of frustration and shattered it. Suddenly, the reception area's door was pushed open again and another employee walked in. He looked very displeased with Jared's outburst. While waiting for Nadia Alexander to meet him at the Herbalist Society Southern Branch, Kevin suddenly got a call from Miss Wilson. She told him that Jared Hayes was at Williams Media to meet with the CEO. Unaware that Kevin was actually the company's CEO, Jared's father had asked him to set up a partnership and acquire some power pills. However, Kevin had no interest in dealing with the Hayes family after what happened to Phoebe. After Miss Wilson relayed this to Jared and left the reception room, he shattered a coffee table out of frustration. Another employee immediately entered the room. Thinking that this person was the president and that he was about to apologize for Miss Wilson's behavior, Jared became arrogant once again.
I knew Williams Media would never give up a potential partnership with the Hayes family. However, since your secretary has just offended me, I've decided to double the number of power pills that we'll be needing in exchange for our cooperation.
In his heart, Jared wanted to humiliate Williams Media's president so that he would never dare to look down on the Hayes family again. As for Miss Wilson, he also planned to make her beg for his forgiveness as part of the deal. However, Jared wasn't prepared for the response that he got. The employee simply stared at him as if he was an idiot. He sighed and informed him, "Sir, you need to pay for the coffee table that you just damaged."
What the hell did you just say?
Jared reacted in confusion. Please go to the finance department to cover the cost of its replacement. Otherwise, we'll call the police. The employee didn't seem to want to waste his time with this fool. Before Jared could utter another word, the employee walked out of the reception room. Jared couldn't believe what was happening to him. As the Hayes family's likely heir, why was he being given such treatment? Jared finally realized that he didn't have any influence in Chicago, so he was left with no choice but to follow the employee's instructions and pay for the damages he'd caused. Besides, if he didn't succeed in currying favor with Williams Media and then got entangled with the police on top of it, Jared would definitely face his father's wrath once he returned to Detroit. Meanwhile, Kevin was leaning against the wall of the Herbalist Society Southern Branch entrance and playing around with his phone. It had been half an hour since he called, but Nadia was still nowhere to be found. Suddenly, a shadow blocked Kevin's light. He thought Nadia had finally arrived, but when he looked up, he found an old man standing in front of him, surrounded by several other individuals. Kevin Williams. The old man kept looking at him with strong hatred in his eyes. Do I know you? Have we met? Kevin asked with a slight frown. The old man's gaze made him feel very uncomfortable. You don't know me, but you know my grandson, the old man replied coldly. I don't like to chat with strangers. If you have nothing else to say, please leave. Kevin could vaguely feel that the old man wasn't friendly, even though he'd never seen him before. Listen up, young man. The Butler family will make you pay for hurting my grandson. As long as I still have a breath left in me, you can forget about living peacefully in Chicago. The old man clenched his fist tightly. When he heard this, Kevin instantly understood who the man was. Doug Butler's grandfather, George, was the Butler family patriarch. Kevin glanced at the furious man and smiled contemptuously. How's Doug doing, by the way? If my guess is correct, you came here to buy some medicinal pills for him, didn't you? George Butler didn't reply. Instead, he just kept staring at Kevin. He knew that this young man was no longer just the useless son-in-law of the Jones family, but also was the powerful CEO of Williams Media. Therefore, he couldn't do anything to control Kevin. Still, his grandson's situation made him feel uneasy now that Kevin was standing there right in front of him. If you want to take revenge, I'd be happy to oblige and have some fun with you and your relatives. But if you waste your time with me instead of getting your grandson some medicine, I'm afraid that he won't be able to survive in the hospital much longer. Kevin smiled and patted the man's shoulder. Besides, I don't think it would be nice of me to put an older gentleman like you in the hospital. Don't you agree? How dare you speak to our grandpa like that? One of the members of the Butler family couldn't bear it any longer.
You're just a freeloader and a loser. How dare you speak to our patriarch like that?
Another relative sneered. If you say another disrespectful word towards our family, I'll have to beat some sense in you. A third one threatened. Kevin couldn't help but laugh as his eyes swept across all these angry people one by one. Who do you think you guys are? Kevin said coldly. I was only talking to George Butler. What right do you have to interrupt me? If any of you say one more word to me, you'll all end up like Doug. With that, Kevin stomped one of his feet on the ground, and for a second or two they could feel the ground shaking below them. They looked at each other and were very puzzled. Young people like you should learn to keep a low profile. George Butler pretended to be indifferent. However, a hint of shock flashed across his eyes as well. Do you mean that you only bully old people like yourself? Kevin playfully teased and gave him a gentle pat on the shoulder. This drew the fury of the rest of the family representatives. Kevin had undoubtedly insulted the entire Butler family.
How dare you disrespect my father? You've gone too far, you piece of trash.
One of George Butler's sons growled. Grandpa Butler, please let me give this guy a good beating, one of his grandsons offered. They all began to crack their necks and knuckles as they got ready to fight. They glared at Kevin as if their eyes were about to spit out fire. It seemed that they were only waiting for George Butler to nod his head before beating Kevin up. By now, this confrontation had attracted an audience as many people stopped in their tracks and whispered to each other. After all, the Butler family was one of Chicago's wealthiest families, so there were quite a number of onlookers who knew them.
This is outrageous. That young man actually disrespected that old man like that?
An onlooker gasped. Doesn't he recognize who that person is? He actually dared to offend the Butler family patriarch. Another woman shook her head. Everyone thought that Kevin was about to pay for his actions, but what happened next shocked them all. All of you, keep quiet. George Butler coldly swept his gaze over his family, then glanced at Kevin. You better know who you're dealing with, young man. Just walk away before you regret anything. I'm not afraid of an arrogant old man like you. Like I said earlier, if you want to take revenge for your grandson, feel free to bring it on, Kevin replied in a condescending tone. However, this was all because he wanted to show that the Butler family wasn't a big threat to him. Be careful what you wish for, Mr. Williams. We're ready to fight to the death. The resentment deep in George Butler's eyes intensified. The surrounding people began to discuss in hushed voices amongst themselves once again.
Who exactly is this person? Could he be a young member of another prominent family?
One man wondered. That guy? Have you seen the clothes that he's wearing? Impossible! The woman beside him sneered.
Wait, I've seen him somewhere before. Isn't he that useless son-in-law from the Jones family? No wonder he looks so familiar.
One man finally recognized Kevin. This guy? I can't believe the Jones family would dare to provoke the Butler family. They couldn't hold a candle to them. One woman laughed out loud. The rest of the people who were watching exploded in laughter as well, pointing their fingers at Kevin and mocking him. However, Kevin wasn't bothered by this at all. He only glanced at them briefly before turning his attention back to George Butler. All right, if that's what you want, then I'll wait right here for your next move. But just to be clear, what happened to Doug was your fault. All I asked for was a phone call. But I guess that mistake isn't something that your grandson alone can make up for. Just as George Butler was about to say something else, Nadia Alexander, along with a few senior members from the Herbalist Society's Southern branch, quickly squeezed through the crowd and walked over to them. The surrounding crowd couldn't believe their eyes.
Nadia Alexander is here? George Butler's really got some friends in high places.
An onlooker was impressed.
How dare he cause trouble at the entrance of the Herbalist Society's Southern branch? That piece of trash will surely get his butt kicked.
Another mocked in a lowered voice. After all, Nadia Alexander had a high rank and the crowd knew it. I'm sorry I'm late, Kevin. We just had an emergency meeting, Nadia said apologetically. If you make me wait this long again next time, don't expect me to help you again. Kevin shook his head impatiently. Their conversation stunned the onlookers. However, at the same time, the Butler family representatives suddenly became very excited. Kevin was really too arrogant for his own good. It was one thing for him to bully them, but now he was insulting the president of the Herbalist Society's Southern branch? This time there was no need for the Butler family to intervene. This good-for-nothing son-in-law was going to be punished by Nadia herself. The senior members who were accompanying Nadia recovered after a brief moment of shock.
You're a really bold young man. How dare you speak to our president like that?
One of the herbalists remarked.
Insulting our president is the same as insulting our entire branch. This is unacceptable behavior. You better apologize right now.
Another senior member was fuming. Kevin simply frowned at them. He just stood there and didn't say anything in his defense. Who gave you the authority to speak to Mr. Williams like this? Nadia scolded them harshly. Her reaction shocked everyone. What did she just say? Did Nadia really call this piece of trash Mr. Williams? The smiles on the faces of the Butler family representatives froze, and the senior members who had just spoken against Kevin were now filled with fear.
President, do you know this young man?
One of them asked. Although Nadia was much younger than them, there weren't many people in the Herbalist Society who dared to challenge her power and herbalism skills. Mr. Williams is a distinguished guest of ours, and his presence today was personally requested by the head of the entire Herbalist Society. Do you want me to fire you all from the Southern branch? Nadia's voice wasn't loud, but the serious tone in her voice made everyone shudder. The senior members' facial expressions changed dramatically. They had all been part of the Herbalist Society for several decades, and only a handful of people had ever been personally invited by the head of the entire organization during that span of time. Was this young man really that special? How powerful was he? And what skills did he have? Hurry up and apologize to Mr. Williams, Nadia demanded.
Mr. Williams, I'm sorry.
The two senior members slowly lowered their heads and apologized to Kevin. Although they were unwilling at first, they didn't dare to disobey Nadia and risk getting fired. Mr. Williams, please, come with me. We need to discuss some matters, Nadia said with a smile. Why should I go in with you? You made me wait outside for a long time before you came out, Kevin repeated, this time showing even more displeasure. When Nadia heard this, she felt very awkward. She wasn't expecting that Kevin would talk that way to her. As the president of the Herbalist Society's Southern branch, she'd never received such treatment before. However, Kevin had something that she badly needed, so she couldn't act unkindly toward him. "Mr. Williams, I'm really sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. Please forgive me." Nadia blushed slightly as she lowered her eyes. "Well, as long as I'm here, I guess I'll go in with you to take a look." Kevin casually put his hands in his pockets and deliberately glanced at the surrounding people, pausing specifically at George Butler. Kevin was subtly telling him, "Did you see that? Even the president of the Herbalist Society's Southern Branch is afraid of me. Who do you think the Butler family is?" George Butler could tell exactly what Kevin was thinking, and this silent defeat was even more difficult for him to swallow. His face quickly turned red, and he began to hyperventilate. After letting out a strange cry, he suddenly fainted on the spot. "Grandpa!" The Butlers quickly surrounded him. For a moment, they were at a loss as to what to do as they gave Kevin a strange and fearful look. Nadia didn't bother to attend to them as she quickly followed Kevin and walked toward the building's entrance, leaving the senior members of her organization to sort out this mess. As they went up to her office, Nadia remarked, "Before we go in, there's something that I think you need to be mentally prepared for." "What is it? Does it smell like a dead rat in here or something?" Kevin teased her. "Can you come up with a better guess?" Nadia couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. "Did something happen to the medicinal herbs?" Kevin's expression suddenly changed. "Well, why don't we go inside first?" Nadia quickly led Kevin into her office. She looked around cautiously and then closed the door. "What exactly is going on here?" Kevin's eyes looked serious as he gazed around Nadia's office. Kevin knew that the ingredients needed to refine the life prolongation pill were extremely difficult to find. If he made a mistake, it wouldn't be easy to gather all of them again. However, the medicinal herbs were nowhere to be found at the moment. Did the Herbalist Society run into an unexpected problem? Nadia got a very serious look on her face and then slowly told him what had happened. After discussing the matter with Kevin during Williams Media's Power Pill auction, the first thing she did when she returned to the Herbalist Society's Southern Branch was to order various resources from their headquarters. Among these, the most important thing was the medicinal ingredients for refining the life prolongation pill. However, an accident occurred in transit. 15 members of the Herbalist Society who had been assigned to keeping the items safe were suddenly ambushed while they were on the way to Chicago. Everyone was killed, so they had no way of verifying who was behind this attack. "It seems the Herbalist Society has a powerful archenemy on their hands," Kevin casually remarked. However, he couldn't help but wonder, why did Nadia still invite him inside knowing that they didn't have the ingredients? Did they know that he was hiding something? "Now, without the herbs, how can we make a life prolongation pill?" Nadia asked with a frown. Kevin didn't answer her question. He knew that if he opened his mouth, he might get into trouble again. "Do you have any herbs?" Nadia didn't know why she asked this, but the words slipped out of her mouth. "The herbs for the life prolongation pill are very rare. How could I have them?" Kevin didn't even blink as he lied to her. Although he did have the necessary ingredients, it was only enough to refine one pill. The real problem was that making a life prolongation pill required very advanced herbalist skills, and Kevin couldn't guarantee that he would be able to successfully do the job in just one attempt. Kevin had previously agreed to Nadia's invitation mainly because he wanted to use this opportunity to practice his skills. After all, if he was eventually able to successfully refine a life prolongation pill, the Herbalist Society wouldn't mind him failing a couple of times along the way. Just as the two of them were thinking about their own plans, a junior member of the Herbalist Society's Southern Branch suddenly rushed into Nadia's office. "Why are you in such a hurry? Is there something wrong?" Nadia asked without even looking him in the eye. She was feeling a bit annoyed at the moment. "Yes, Madam President. We just received news that the Pearl family's auction tonight will include renewal grass and a heavenly flower," he reported excitedly. "Is that so?" Nadia seemed to have found the solution to her problem. "Zane Pearl himself announced it about 2 hours ago," he replied respectfully. "All right, I got it. You may leave now." Nadia gently waved her hand. After the junior member left, Kevin smiled and asked, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" "I'm guessing you noticed it too," Nadia replied snappily. The two of them were thinking the exact same thing. Whether it was the heavenly flower or the renewal grass, both were outstanding medicinal herbs that were rarely seen in the world, so they would surely attract a lot of wealthy bidders. But they were also the two key ingredients needed to refine the life prolongation pill. Why did the Pearl family suddenly offer them for auction at the same time that the Herbalist Society lost the exact same medicinal herbs? How could there be such a coincidence? Something fishy was going on, but who would believe them? "How do you think we should handle this?" Nadia asked in a low voice. "Well, some of the items offered during Pearl family auctions are usually sold on behalf of outside parties, so this alone isn't enough to prove that the herbs were stolen by the Pearl family. Although this is technically an issue of the Herbalist Society, and since I'm just an outsider, I can't interfere without raising suspicion." After saying this, Kevin suddenly thought for a moment and continued, "But no matter what the truth is, we have to participate in the auction. No matter how expensive they may be, we have to get those herbs." "This is the only way." Nadia sighed deeply and agreed. But Kevin frowned. He vaguely felt that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Meanwhile, many well-dressed people were gathered together inside a luxurious mansion.
"My condition is getting more and more serious. Has there been any news from the Herbalist Society?"
the old man asked in a deep and solemn voice. As his bright eyes looked into the distance, the old man didn't make any excessive movements while seated, but he somehow gave the people who were present a feeling that they should avoid making direct eye contact with him. 2 days ago, the Southern Branch's president, Nadia Alexander, sent a message. She said that she had found someone who could refine the life prolongation pill, but for some reason, she hasn't arrived yet. A middle-aged man answered respectfully. When he announced this, everyone else in the room let out a sigh of relief. The old man was the family's patriarch, whom they all relied on.
"What's the reason for her absence? Maybe Nadia has been in one of the highest positions in the Herbalist Society for a few years now, but has she forgotten who's really in charge?"
The old man was obviously not satisfied with the news. "Send someone to inform Nadia immediately. If she wants to continue to keep her position, she must bring the life prolongation pill for my father right now," the middle-aged man shouted. Inside her living room, Lily was sitting on the couch with a worried look on her face. Although the television was turned on, she wasn't really in the mood to pay attention to the show that was airing. Kevin hadn't returned home in days, and Lily was worried that he might have encountered some trouble again. After all, he'd only just recovered from the injuries he had sustained at the Healing Arts School's martial arts competition. Just then, Dorothy suddenly came out of the kitchen.
"Lily, do you know where that piece of trash is?"
"Mom, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Lily was worried when she saw the anxiety on her mother's face.
"Don't worry about me, but tell me, do you know where Kevin is?"
Dorothy seemed to panic as she knelt down and tightly squeezed her daughter's hands. "I have no idea." Lily's eyes suddenly dimmed.
"I'm so screwed, Lily."
Dorothy threw her hands up in the air and sat down on the couch in a daze. Since yesterday, the leaders from the 10 grade schools had started to look for her one after another. After promising them that she would get them all some power pills, they all wanted to know whether she had gotten her hands on any or not. How could Dorothy respond to this? She didn't even know what a power pill was. She could only say that Kevin was still looking for more with all his might. But as soon as she left their apartment building that day, she bumped into Paul Vaughn from the Central Alternative Healing Academy. When he heard that she hadn't gotten the power pills yet, he immediately took out his dagger and threatened her, saying that there was a limit to his patience. If he didn't receive the power pills in 2 days, she would have to suffer the consequences. Only now did Dorothy realize that the people who had been so respectful towards her useless son-in-law the other day were actually very ruthless. They were only acting polite because they wanted something from Kevin. Dorothy had acted so tough and arrogant because she thought that they were just a bunch of rich people with no common sense. And as long as Kevin was able to supply some power pills, she would reap the benefits. However, she never expected that Kevin would suddenly disappear without even sending a message. And with all these powerful men going after her in his absence, Dorothy was currently at a loss about what to do.
Where do you think that piece of trash went? Why hasn't he come home yet?
Dorothy asked fiercely.
Mom, you were the one who told him not to come back until he found his elusive mentor,
Lily muttered weakly.
Why did he take my word so seriously? We wouldn't be in this situation if he just found a good-paying job in the first place. I used to tell him all the time to work hard to make money. Why didn't he listen to me back then?
Dorothy sighed. No matter how much she hated her son-in-law, she wished she could find Kevin immediately.
Mom, let me ask you something. Did the people who came to our house the other day come looking for you?
Lily also began to realize that something was wrong. When did Dorothy ever care about Kevin's whereabouts before? She never wanted him home.
Lily, I don't know how you do it. I want Kevin to be back home tonight, and I also need to get those pills. Otherwise, he won't be welcome in my house ever again,
Dorothy anxiously demanded. Those people were obviously not to be messed with, and the best way out of this situation was to get Kevin back as soon as possible. As long as he got those power pills, wouldn't she still reap huge benefits? When she thought about these things, Dorothy started to admire herself again for being so smart. But Lily didn't answer her mother. She could tell that Dorothy had gotten herself into a tricky situation with all of those powerful men the other day. With Kevin not answering her phone calls or even replying to her messages, where would she go to find him? Meanwhile, Kevin was completely unaware of what was happening at home. He just sat on Nadia's chair and leisurely drank a soda while thinking about the Herbalist Society's missing herbs and the Pearl family's auction. Just as Kevin was starting to enjoy himself, his phone suddenly rang. He checked his phone and saw that it was Zane Pearl calling. This surprised him. After all, ever since the last Pearl family auction that he attended, the two of them almost had no contact, let alone any interactions. Mr. Pearl, to what do I owe the pleasure of this call? Kevin playfully teased him. Kevin, why are you being so formal? After all, we're brothers. Anyway, I've been busy with family matters lately, so I haven't been able to keep in touch. Don't get mad at me for ghosting you. Zane started to laugh as soon as he said this. No worries, Zane. I was just messing with you. Anyway, I'm sure there's a reason why you're calling me. What's up? A smile appeared on Kevin's face. He knew very well that Zane was a person who wouldn't call unless he had something important to tell him. And even before Zane could say anything, he already knew that it was most likely about the auction. Well, the Pearl family is going to hold another auction. I specifically called to ask you if you have the time to come and take a look, Zane said with a smile. If you find something you like, I'll ask someone to hold it for you. I'll even give you a discount on the price. Come on, Zane. Why don't you just give it to me for free? Kevin teased. You know I can't do that, Kevin. It's not up to me to decide anyway. Besides, the Pearl family only operates a small business. At the end of the day, we're just here to make a living. Zane shamelessly quipped. It was obvious that he had used this line before on other people. Kevin could only roll his eyes when he heard this. If the Pearl family auction was merely a small business, how rich would Chicago be? Anyway, do you have the time? If you come, I can save a seat in the first row for you. Zane seemed to be in a hurry. I'll be there. Please reserve 2 seats for me. I plan to come with the president of the Herbalist Society Southern Branch, Nadia Alexander. Kevin happily agreed. Kevin, since when do you get along with the Herbalist Society? Zane asked in shock. Prior to calling Kevin, Zane had done some careful research on him. According to the information he received, because Kevin was just known for being the useless son-in-law of the Jones family, he had been looked down upon by many people in Chicago for the past few years. However, the more Zane found out about him, the more he realized that Kevin had been hiding his true power from everyone all along. When Kevin made a name for himself in the Healing Art School's martial arts competition, Zane noted how Wayne Ford didn't hesitate to cause trouble with the Union for him, cutting ties with its mysterious leader with just a wave of his hand. Zane also found out that the leaders of the 10 grade schools had paid him a visit a few days ago to purchase some power pills. That was why he'd made up his mind and decided that he would try to get close to Kevin. If his power and status really took off in the future, the Pearl family would be able to obtain a lot of benefits from him.
Don't tell me you've joined the Herbalist Society.
Zane gulped. He'd really made the right call about befriending Kevin. Sorry to disappoint you, but I didn't join the Herbalist Society and I have no intention to do so. It's just that its Southern Branch's president had been counting on me to help with something. Kevin replied proudly.
That's so kind and awesome of you, brother.
Zane praised him happily.
I'll keep those seats reserved for you then. See you guys tonight.
No problem. Kevin hung up the phone. He tapped his fingers lightly on the side table as he was deep in thought. Since the Pearl family wants to cause trouble, I've got a lot of fun in store for them tonight. Kevin began to get a cunning smile on his face. Suddenly, his phone rang again. This time it was Lily calling him. After hesitating for a second, Kevin deliberately left his phone on the table and let it ring. It wasn't that he wanted to ignore Lily, but since the leaders of the 10 grade schools had already found their home, he would only be putting her life in more danger if she knew where he was right now. So Kevin had to act cold and remain unreachable for the time being. His priority right now was the auction. Zane Pearl had officially invited Kevin to attend the Pearl family auction later that night. He did this in hopes of befriending Kevin and gaining benefits from being associated with him. However, Kevin had his own plans to teach the Pearl family a lesson for the trouble they caused while obtaining the renewal glass and the heavenly flower so they could refine the life prolongation pill. Shortly after Kevin confirmed that he and Nadia would attend, Lily tried one more time to call him on behalf of Dorothy. However, Kevin deliberately chose not to answer, fearing that knowing his whereabouts would only put his wife in more danger from the 10 grade schools. Time passed by slowly. The Pearl family auction was set to start at 8 p.m. that evening, and Kevin arrived with Nadia Alexander by 7:30 p.m. You stay here for a while. I need to go somewhere else for a bit. I'll come back and find you just before the auction starts. As soon as Nadia finished speaking, she left the auction house with a few people. Kevin didn't ask her why. After all, it was the Herbalist Society's business, and he was just an outsider. The Pearl family's auction had been famous for many years, and it always attracted the interest of many wealthy and prominent individuals, including some familiar faces that Kevin recognized. Well, if it isn't that useless son-in-law, Kevin, what is a piece of trash like you doing here at such a prestigious auction? What can you afford to buy? Sherwin Blair sneered as he walked up to Kevin along with his entourage. What are you guys doing here together? Kevin looked at the people in front of him with surprise. Blanca Steele, Rain Steele, Sherwin Blair, and Mike Tripp, all hanging out with each other, seemed like a terrible idea. What a toxic group.
More friends leads to more opportunities. Do we need your permission to make friends?
Mike glared at Kevin. There's no need for that, and even if you wanted to tell me, I wouldn't be interested in finding out. I guess birds of a feather really do flock together. After saying that, Kevin turned around and was about to walk away. Wait a minute, Kevin. Don't be in such a hurry to leave. The Pearl family auction will start in less than half an hour. Aren't all of us here either your friends or classmates? Since we already know each other pretty well, why don't you stick with us? Sherwin Blair looked at him and said, In case Kelly finds out later, she can't say that I didn't take care of you. What are you saying? Even if we bring him to sit with us, what can a useless son-in-law buy? This isn't charity work. Blanca grumbled unhappily. That's right. Just talking to this kind of person makes me feel like I'm lowering myself. Rain pinched her nose in disgust, as if she was afraid of smelling Kevin's scent. If you want to be with him, don't sit anywhere near us sisters.
Hey, we're all from the same school. There's no need for unpleasantness and insults.
Mike sneered and said,
You have to know that he's the one who donated millions of dollars to the school's fundraiser. Although he doesn't have any money himself, he's got a very rich wife.
Hey, Mike, thanks for reminding me of that. Kevin will probably just squander his wife's money away again tonight. And when he gets home, he'll probably never hear the end of it from her. Sherwin laughed and ridiculed Kevin. The rest of them couldn't help but laugh out loud when they heard this. At that moment, there were already many people present in the auction hall who had been waiting for the event to begin. When they heard Sherwin say that, they couldn't help but cast curious glances at Kevin as well. Kevin, tell me, isn't it better for you to just stay home with your wife? Why did you have to come out and humiliate yourself? Don't tell me that you haven't accepted who you are yet. Sherwin lightly patted Kevin's shoulder a few times as he mocked him.
That's enough, Sherwin. For all we know, Kevin might be here to broaden his horizons. After all, it's not easy to enter this place. When we all attend the auction later, he can still peek through the crack of the door, Mike quipped while slightly shaking his head. The two of them were so in sync with their banter that it made both Blanca and Rain laugh so hard that they almost couldn't stand straight. Kevin looked at the four of them as if he was looking at a bunch of fools. He hadn't even said a word, yet these four guys kept talking trash about him. The surrounding people looked at Kevin and began to point at him. So this is the useless son-in-law from the Jones family? He really doesn't look like much. How can he live off his wife?
An onlooker remarked. I'm very curious how he got in here. Were the security guards at the entrance slacking off? Another commented. Hearing this made Mike and the other three laugh even harder. This was exactly the reaction that they were hoping to generate. After laughing for a few minutes, Sherwin finally stopped as he wiped the tears from the corner of his eye. Kevin, don't worry. After the auction is over, I'll tell you all about it. After that, you can brag about it as if you were actually part of the experience. Sherwin felt so good in his heart. He had never had a chance to make fun of Kevin like this before. On the contrary, he'd let this piece of trash show off in front of Kelly again and again, and it was always at his expense. Thinking that this was finally his moment to shine, Sherwin knew that if he didn't humiliate Kevin properly, he would feel sorry afterward for not seizing the moment. Are all of you that bored? What does it have to do with all of you if I choose to attend an auction? Kevin finally retorted.
Kevin, this is all your fault. We're all just looking out for you as your schoolmates, Mike replied sarcastically. Besides, can't you take a good joke?
Do you really think I'm that stupid? Perhaps you're the dumb one. Kevin glanced at him with disdain. Mike was stunned for a second, then his face turned serious. How could he let this piece of trash insult him in front of the Steele sisters?
Kevin, you don't know what's good for you. Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you've made some progress in your strength training, Mike scolded him loudly. There are many people in this world who are more powerful than you, and once I get to buy a power pill from Williams Media, do you believe that I still won't surpass your level of strength? Without any money, you'll just remain a low-level piece of trash.
So what? Kevin asked calmly.
What the hell?
Mike was confused by his reaction. He thought that Kevin would immediately fly into a rage upon hearing what he said. Why was Kevin being so calm about all of this? It seemed like Mike had underestimated him. Still, many people watching from the sidelines expressed their agreement with what Mike was saying. That useless son-in-law is a student at the Healing Arts School? If a person like that is the school champion, then it seems like the school is only subpar. I suddenly regret letting my younger brother study there. An onlooker shook her head in disbelief.
That's absolutely right. So what if he's strong? Without any money, it'll be difficult for him to even get into the auction.
Another one sneered. Kevin, don't bite off more than you can chew. You'll only embarrass yourself further by staying here. Sherwin's tone also became cold. Sherwin, I see you're finally starting to show your true colors, Kevin smiled. How good would it have been if you'd been this way before? Do you know I spent so much effort pretending to play along with you because of Kelly? It was so tiring.
You piece of trash. If I don't kick you out of this place right now, it'll be hard to control all the anger that I'm feeling right now.
Mike clenched his fist tightly. If it wasn't for the fact that he knew he couldn't defeat Kevin, Mike would have attacked Kevin a long time ago. "Security! Where are those security guards?" Sherwin turned around and shouted. "What's taking them so long? Judging from the poor clothes he was wearing, anyone could tell that he had sneaked in. Besides, without an invitation letter, how hard would it be to find someone to kick him out? This is all such a waste of time." Rain was beginning to doubt the security guard's competence. "I really don't know why my cousin would make friends with someone like you," Blanca added with extreme disgust. Her face was full of disdain. Soon, 5 or 6 security guards ran over quickly, anxiously wondering what was going on. The Pearl family had repeatedly emphasized that no mistakes were allowed, and they made sure that everyone who came in that evening were either rich or prominent figures with invitation letters.
"Sir, may I ask what's the matter?" the head security guard asked respectfully.
"It's good that you're finally here. Now may I ask what's your basis for letting people in? Look at what this person is wearing. Why did you let him in here?" Sherwin asked coldly.
"Well, what are you waiting for? Get this man out of here right now. We shouldn't let him delay the auction."
Mike waved his hand impatiently. The security guards looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with doubt.
"Sir, I'm sorry for bothering you. Can you please show us your invitation letter?"
The head security guard didn't dare to believe Sherwin's biased words. "I don't have the invitation letter with me, but when my friend comes back, I'll gladly show it to you," Kevin said, feigning some embarrassment. "I also know the members of the Pearl family." Although Zane Pearl had called to personally invite him earlier, he didn't send anyone to deliver the invitation letter. Despite this, Kevin was able to enter because he had come with the people from the Herbalist Society Southern Branch. They were all in for a big surprise. When Kevin remained calm despite their best efforts to provoke him, Sherwin and Mike eventually called for security to kick him out of the auction venue. Given this, the head security guard had no choice but to politely ask Kevin for his invitation letter. However, he'd come in using Nadia's invitation letter, so he couldn't provide it at the moment. Since no one knew that Zane had personally invited him earlier, Kevin used this misunderstanding to feign embarrassment, only vaguely mentioning that he knew people from the Pearl family. "Can you believe the nerve of this guy? He can't even tell a decent lie. We saw him here alone. He clearly doesn't have any friends here, so you should hurry up and kick him out." Sherwin Blair smiled proudly, thinking that he'd finally gotten even with Kevin.
"I'm sorry, sir. If you don't have an invitation letter with you right now, I'll have to escort you out."
The head security guard made a gesture towards the exit. Nobody in the crowd took Kevin's comment seriously. Even if he claimed to know people from the Pearl family, it was too vague of a statement to carry any weight. After all, practically everyone there could say the same thing. "Are you sure? You might regret this later." Kevin sighed as he patted the lead security guard's arm. This shocked him and everyone who was watching. Could it be that Kevin had really been invited by the Pearl family? After all, he just won first place at the martial arts competition. Perhaps the Healing Arts School had been invited, and he was their representative. For a moment, the surrounding people's facial expressions changed when they thought about the situation, and no one was willing to speak ill of him anymore. The security guard regained his composure.
"Sir, please just kindly follow us to the exit. We don't want to use any unnecessary force on you, nor do we want to disturb the peace in this venue."
"I've already given you a chance. What will happen next is entirely up to you." Kevin showed a mocking smile because he just saw Zane Pearl coming towards him.
"Sir, I'm asking you one last time to please leave the auction house. Otherwise, don't blame us if we have to sort this out through forceful measures."
The head security guard's face had already turned completely cold. He was now sure that Kevin had really come in to cause trouble.
"Why are you still talking to this person? Hurry up and kick him out."
Mike really wanted to see Kevin being thrown out like trash.
"I'm sorry, sir."
The head security guard waved at the other guards behind him. Suddenly, a loud shout could be heard from across the other side of the large room.
"Enough of this nonsense. What the hell is going on here?"
Before anyone could turn around and take a look behind them, Zane, Pearl, and Nadia Alexander had already walked over and made their way through the surrounding crowd.
And who the hell are you?
Mike smiled coldly as he sneered at the two of them.
Why are you protecting this piece of trash? Could it be that you're his accomplices?
How dare you come to my family's auction and say that to my face? Zane fumed as he slapped Mike's cheek. Mr. Zane Pearl? Sherwin Blair and the Steele sisters gasped. In Chicago, Zane Pearl's reputation could be compared with someone as ruthless as Dalton Steele and Dominic Archer. So everyone in the room began to get nervous as soon as they recognized him.
Mr. Pearl!
All of the security guards greeted Zane respectfully.
How dare you guys treat this guest with such disrespect? Don't you know that I personally invited him?
Zane, with his violent temper, fiercely punched the head security guard right in the stomach. Mike, who was still recovering from Zane's slap, was holding his cheek as he turned to Kevin.
Why didn't you just say that you knew Zane Pearl? If you'd explained things clearly, we could have avoided this troublesome situation.
You guys are pretty bold, aren't you? Kevin smiled at Sherwin and the Steele sisters as he shook his head. He knew that nobody would believe him even if he had told them the truth. Cold sweat broke out on Sherwin's forehead. Mr. Pearl, we were just joking around.
Joking around?
Zane glanced at him coldly.
I think it's best to let my brother be the judge of that.
His words suddenly caused an uproar amongst the crowd.
Did Mr. Pearl just call that useless son-in-law his brother? What the hell is going on? I can't keep up with what's happening anymore.
Everyone was confused. Sherwin and the Steele sisters were so shocked that they were standing there with their mouths hanging open. They never expected Kevin and Zane to be such close friends. Could they be taken out by them all at once? This was too much for them to handle. Kevin, what do you think we should do about this? Zane handed over to him the right to handle the matter. To be honest, Zane really wanted to beat these people up. It hadn't been easy for him to convince Kevin to participate in the Pearl family auction, but Sherwin and the others had already found a way to offend him before it could even start. As everyone watched, Kevin just smiled faintly and walked into the auction room with Zane. He didn't even bother to look back at the four of them. Without saying anything, this kind of silent neglect somehow felt worse than public humiliation. How did he get so close to Zane Pearl? What's so special about that useless son-in-law? Sherwin cursed with fear lingering in his heart. Kevin's indifference towards them made him feel even more embarrassed.
When I find a chance, I'll definitely get my revenge on that piece of trash.
Mike clenched his fist tightly as he stared at Kevin's back. However, while the two of them were talking, they didn't notice that Nadia had yet to go inside the auction room. You're from the Blair and Tripp families, aren't you? Nadia gave them a deep look. From now on, your two families will no longer be able to buy medicinal pills from any branch of the Herbalist Society.
How dare you threaten us like that? Who the hell do you think you are?
Mike had fully lost his composure at that point. He then tried to size her up without knowing who he was dealing with.
Could this person be any more of a fool? How dare he speak to Nadia Alexander like that?
Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what to say for a moment. Sherwin fearfully looked at Nadia. You must be mistaken. This is all just one big misunderstanding, right? Misunderstanding? Mr. Williams is a guest of mine, and in case you didn't know it, the person you just insulted is the president of the Herbalist Society's Southern Branch. After Nadia said this, she asked her members to deal accordingly with Mike and the others. Then she turned around and slowly walked into the auction. Upon hearing this, both Blanca and Rain were completely dumbfounded. They finally understood why their cousin Dalton was so close to Kevin. With connections to the Herbalist Society, that useless son-in-law had become a person that the entire Steele family couldn't afford to be enemies with. This left the Steele sisters feeling instant regret.
Damn it! What's so great about that piece of trash?
Mike still couldn't understand what was happening. Before he could utter another word, several members of the Herbalist Society had already surrounded him. Without saying another word, they knocked him out with a punch to the face and threw him out of the auction house like trash. Then they turned their attention toward Sherwin Blair. "There's no need for any of that. I'll see myself out." Sherwin smiled apologetically as he quickly ran for the exit. Meanwhile, the Steele sisters had gotten away with just a stern warning. Still, this was enough to frighten them to their core. As for the Pearl family auction, Kevin had just won the first bid. From there, almost no one dared to outbid him on anything he liked, including the renewal grass and heavenly flower. Everyone there understood that after that evening, the once useless son-in-law of the Jones family would take a huge leap in status and subsequently become a part of Chicago's upper class. Moreover, offending him was indirectly making enemies with the Herbalist Society. The next morning, Kevin and Nadia were escorted by a group of men taking a helicopter across the mountains and rivers of the Midwest. For security reasons, Kevin was blindfolded, so he had no clue where they were heading. When his blindfold was finally taken off, they'd already landed near a luxurious mansion after traveling for a few hours. As he looked around, Kevin was amazed to find dozens of men in suits quickly approaching them. "Nadia, didn't you bring me here to refine the life prolongation pill for someone?" Kevin asked. "That's right, and this is where he lives," Nadia replied with a smile. "Do you remember what I said to you before? As long as you are able to help this person, there will be great benefits in store for you." "Are you talking about Herman Thompson?" Kevin wondered. "How did you guess?" Nadia was surprised. To be able to live in such a secluded place like this in the Midwest, it could only be him. Kevin's expression was very serious. Although the Thompson family wasn't officially ranked in the Midwest, those who had known about them recognized that they were certainly a lot more powerful than the Sutherland family. Operating behind the scenes for many generations, they had ties to various companies and organizations across the region, including the Herbalist Society. By then, the men in suits had arrived in front of them. They were led by a young man who was no older than 25 years old. "Nadia, you're finally here. My father has been waiting for your arrival." The young man greeted her warmly. "Come with me. His condition is already very serious, so we must not waste any more time." The day after the Pearl family auction, a helicopter took Nadia and a blindfolded Kevin to the luxurious mansion of Herman Thompson, the patriarch of a powerful family with ties to various companies and organizations across the Midwest, including the Herbalist Society. Soon after arriving, they were greeted by a young man who told Nadia that Herman had been expecting her arrival. They quickly went inside the mansion. The man's name was Kyle Thompson, one of Herman Thompson's grandsons, but although he appeared very easygoing, he still ignored Kevin. In order to resolve this awkwardness, Nadia Alexander decided to speak up. "Kyle, let me introduce you to Kevin Williams. This is the herbalist that I found for your grandfather. His skill in herbalism is far above mine." Hearing this, Kyle looked at Kevin. After staring at him for more than 10 seconds, Kyle's eyes couldn't help but reveal a trace of disgust, especially when he saw Kevin wearing such poor clothes. "That's a good joke, Nadia. How can this person's herbalism skills be higher than yours? Look at how old he is. On top of that, he's wearing such tattered clothes. Don't tell me that you've been deceived by a trickster." Kyle's words were full of disdain. Nadia's facial expression changed when she heard him say this. Knowing how strong Kevin was, who could stop him if he decided to attack Kyle? Furthermore, he was the only one who could refine the life prolongation pill. What would happen to Herman Thompson if Kyle were to provoke Kevin? Nadia subtly glanced over at Kevin. Seeing that he didn't seem to be bothered by Kyle's insult, she secretly heaved a huge sigh of relief. "Kyle, I'm not joking with you. Kevin may be young, but his herbalism skills are beyond my reach, so you should really apologize to him." Nadia frowned slightly as she explained. She wasn't afraid of Kyle in the least. After all, she was from the same generation as his father. "Nadia, are you sure you're not mistaken?" Kyle couldn't believe his ears. The Thompson family members who were standing at the side were also shocked upon hearing this. After all, despite his young age, Kyle was well respected by everyone.
Your grandfather's condition is already quite serious. If we want to treat him, only Kevin can do it." Nadia tried her best to reassure the others. Unfortunately, Kevin wouldn't let the matter go just yet. He looked at Kevin with disdain and asked, "Did you even study herbal medicine? You look quite young for an herbalism expert. Have you ever even had a girlfriend?" Faced with this series of absurd questions, Kevin's face turned slightly red. "I've had some herbalism classes at the Healing Arts School. I'm actually married, and I live at my wife's place." "Are you serious?" Kyle was obviously stunned by his response. He was trying his best to hold back his laughter. The others also looked at Kevin in disbelief. Who the hell did Nadia bring into our home? With his credentials, how are we supposed to believe that this young man is an expert? Even Nadia was at a loss for words. Kyle had obviously dug a hole on purpose, but why did Kevin fall for it so easily? She wanted to just cover his mouth at the moment. However, despite what Nadia and the others might be thinking, Kevin remained unbothered. After all, the insults he'd received in Chicago all these years were much worse than this. Kyle finally recovered his mood and decided to keep toying around with Kevin. "You mentioned that you live at your wife's place. Does this mean you're just a useless son-in-law who depends on her for everything?" In the blink of an eye, Kyle was laughing so hard that he almost couldn't stand up straight. "Nadia, you found a useless son-in-law to refine the life prolongation pill? It's not April Fool's Day yet, is it?" Despite this, the other Thompson family members were trying their best to hold back their laughter out of respect for Nadia. Meanwhile, Kevin only looked at him indifferently once again. Anyway, someone else had begged him on his behalf to refine the pill, so he decided to give Kyle a pass. "Kyle, I think you should give Kevin a chance. Although his background and experience may not be extensive, he won first place in the herbalist contest not long ago," Nadia remarked. "Nadia, can you stop messing around? The herbalist contest was just child's play. It was just one of the methods of selecting students with potential for the Herbalist Society. My grandfather's situation is a lot different, as it requires herbalist skills that can handle a real life-or-death scenario. I don't trust him." Although Kyle's mocking smile was gone, the disdain in his eyes was still quite visible. If it wasn't for his family background, Nadia really wanted to tear Kyle limb from limb. Suddenly, a powerful voice could be heard.
"Is there something wrong, Kyle? Why didn't you return when I asked you to pick Nadia up?"
After that, a middle-aged man quickly walked over to them. "Joseph, you came just in time. This is the herbalist I found for your father. But your son won't believe me and told me to forget about it. That being said, I leave the final decision to you." Nadia was immediately delighted to see Joseph, who was in line to be the Thompson family's leader one day.
"Kyle, what's the matter with you? Don't you want your grandfather to get well?"
Joseph asked his son with a slight frown on his face.
"Dad, don't get angry. Listen to me. I've already interrogated this man. He's just a useless son-in-law with little training and experience in herbalism. Do you think such a person is worthy of helping Grandpa Thompson?"
Kyle was no longer arrogant. His tone immediately became respectful.
"What did you say? A useless son-in-law?"
Joseph looked at Kevin and then turned to Nadia.
"Nadia, the Thompson family has treated you well for many years. How could you make such a joke out of this grave situation?"
Nadia tried to explain herself. But before she could even start, one of the Thompson family's attendants rushed over and said with a depressed face,
"Sir, it's not good. Your father is dying."
"What?" Both Joseph and Kyle immediately panicked. They no longer cared about what to say to Nadia as they quickly rushed upstairs to Herman Thompson's room. "Kevin, why don't we go and take a look too? Perhaps you can still save him," Nadia suggested. Herman Thompson had helped her a great deal over the years, so she really wanted to save him now during his time of need. Kevin nodded his head in agreement. The two of them then went upstairs in a hurry. Along the way, he carefully observed the layout of the Thompson family's mansion. When they arrived outside the room, they saw that it was filled with several Thompson family members surrounding an old man. Their sorrowful cries filled the air.
"Father, please don't leave me."
Joseph sat by Herman Thompson's bedside and cried out loudly. Everyone knew that the reason why the Thompson family had such a powerful reputation in the Midwest was all because of Herman Thompson.
If he suffered an untimely death, then the foundation of the entire family would definitely be shaken, and the whole business empire that he had painstakingly built would risk collapsing within a very short period of time, as their enemies would certainly pounce on them like hungry wolves. While he's still alive, give this pill immediately to Herman Thompson. Kevin's eyes kept scanning the surroundings as he handed a blue and green pill over to Nadia. Is this the stabilizing pill? How did you get this? Nadia asked in shock when she recognized the pill's color. Now is not the time to talk about it. We have to stabilize his vitals first. He doesn't have much time, so you have to go inside now. Kevin hastily pushed Nadia into the room while he waited outside. Herman Thompson's face had turned purple. His body was trembling nonstop. You have to give this pill to Mr. Thompson. This might be our only chance to save his life, Nadia anxiously said as she opened the palm of her right hand to reveal the stabilizing pill that Kevin had just given her. Will it work? Joseph, whose eyes were red from crying, quickly took the pill from Nadia and briefly inspected it. The other Thompson family members in the room all raised their heads and looked at Nadia, unable to say anything as their mouths hung open in surprise. There's no time to waste. Regardless of whether it'll work or not, there's only one way to find out. Nadia's tone was very firm. Joseph gritted his teeth as all the other members of his family nervously watched. With no other option, he carefully put the stabilizing pill into Herman Thompson's mouth. Nadia also tightly clasped her hands as she said a quick prayer. The stabilizing pill was said to effectively stabilize someone's vital signs within 3 seconds. However, since she had no way of verifying whether the pill that Kevin had given her was real or not, she could only wait patiently and hope for the best. When the stabilizing pill entered Herman Thompson's body, he instantly stopped trembling and his face quickly returned to its natural skin complexion. After about half a minute, the bedside monitor indicated that all of his vital signs had calmed down to normal levels. What a miracle! Nadia, you've really helped the Thompson family a lot this time. Thank you for saving my father's life. Joseph was so overwhelmed by joy that he gave Nadia a big hug. But Kevin still had more work to do if Herman Thompson's life was going to be saved. With Herman Thompson in critical condition, Kevin suddenly handed over a stabilizing pill to Nadia, who then took it over to Joseph. Despite not knowing whether it would work or not, Joseph put the pill into Herman Thompson's mouth with no other option or any time to spare. Thankfully, it worked, instantly restoring his vital signs to normal levels. Overjoyed by this, Joseph thanked Nadia for saving Herman Thompson and gave her a big hug. Joseph, Nadia didn't know what to say. While she thought highly of Kevin, even she had her doubts about whether the stabilizing pill would work. Moreover, she suddenly realized that he was just observing from outside the room, and so she didn't want to take the credit for saving Herman Thompson's life. How did it go, Nadia? It looked like the Thompson family was finally going to run out of luck this time, Kevin said as he casually walked into the room. These words instantly provoked the anger of the entire Thompson family. Nadia had just saved Herman Thompson's life, but this young man actually dared to insult her skills? On top of that, he even said that their family was having bad luck. What is that useless son-in-law doing here? Who allowed you to step into this room? Kyle immediately stood up from the bedside and rushed towards Kevin. How dare you insult the Thompson family? Perhaps you're the one who's about to run into some bad luck. However, just as he stopped talking, Kevin suddenly punched Kyle right in the chest, causing him to fall to the floor. Are you aware of the fact that you're a really annoying person? Kevin said coldly as he stepped on Kyle. Kyle couldn't even speak as he tried to catch his breath. When they saw this, everyone in the room couldn't help but look on in shock, but no one made a move to attack Kevin right away. Who on earth is this man, Nadia? Did you bring him here just to cause trouble with us? Joseph's face turned completely serious. It had been many years since someone had dared to offend the Thompson family like that. Joseph, don't get mad. This is Kevin Williams. He was actually the one who gave me the stabilizing pill just now. Nadia tried to calm him down and then added, like I said earlier, Kevin's herbalism skills are more advanced than mine, so I brought him here to refine a life prolongation pill for your father. But Kyle..." Even though Nadia didn't finish what she was saying, Joseph immediately understood what had happened. The entire room fell into silence at the same time, including the insufferably arrogant Kyle, who stopped struggling to get Kevin's foot off his chest. Nadia was the #1 herbalist in the Herbalist Society, and she was also the president of its southern branch. And when she said that Kevin's herbalist skills were above hers, Kyle thought that she was joking. But now she just revealed that the pill that saved Herman Thompson's life had actually come from Kevin. The one who was the most confused about all of this was Joseph. What Nadia just said was enough to prove that Kevin wasn't an ordinary person, but didn't his son tell him earlier that he was only a useless son-in-law? Which of the two should he believe? "Joseph, while the stabilizing pill has managed to stabilize your father's condition for now, it's just a Band-Aid solution. Nonetheless, I can assure you that Kevin can really refine a life prolongation pill." If Nadia had been skeptical at first, she was completely sure by now. If he managed to make a stabilizing pill, was anything at all impossible for Kevin? "No, I can't believe this," Kyle thought to himself as his eyes revealed a look of despair. Instead of helping his son up, Joseph quickly walked over to Kevin and lowered his head.
"Mr. Williams, I'm very sorry my son had offended you. This was all my fault for not teaching him well. On behalf of the entire Thompson family, please accept our deepest apologies. I hope you can be kind enough to let my son go. Also, I would like to ask for your help in refining a life prolongation pill for my father."
"Why should I accept your apology?" Kevin replied indifferently as he looked Joseph right in the eye. Kevin had to admit that Joseph was a powerful and wise man. Despite seeing Kevin punch his son right in front of him, he didn't seem angry at all. However, the other Thompson family members were all shocked to hear this exchange. After all, Joseph was next in line to become their family's leader and could make someone pay with just a snap of his fingers. Putting aside the fact that he had taken the initiative to set aside his pride and apologize, this young man still refused to accept it.
"Mr. Williams, please forgive us."
Joseph gritted his teeth and continued.
"If you can save my father, you'll be a distinguished guest of the Thompson family, and we'll never forget your great act of kindness, sir."
In order to save his father, Joseph had gone all out. Compared to Herman Thompson, Kyle was nothing. As long as Kevin was willing to refine the life prolongation pill, Joseph didn't care if he kicked Kyle in the stomach or even broke his legs. "Didn't your son tell me to forget about it? I promised myself that I wouldn't agree to refining the life prolongation pill if someone doesn't believe that I can do it. And a man's word is a promise that cannot be broken." Kevin slowly lifted his foot up from Kyle's chest. These words caused Joseph's hopeful expression to change instantly as sweat began to trickle down from his forehead. Right at the moment when he'd found a long-term solution for his father, it was suddenly taken away from him because of his son's arrogance. The rest of the Thompson family members also felt uncomfortable, remembering how they had almost laughed at Kevin earlier. Some of them started to scratch their heads and timidly avoid his gaze.
"Is there really no other way around this, Mr. Williams? Perhaps there's still room for negotiation in your heart?"
Joseph asked with some unwillingness. Kevin pointed at Kyle and replied, "I'm a man of my word, so unless he kneels down and begs me, my decision is final." "Dream on! You're just a useless son-in-law. What right do you have to make me kneel down? Also, how can we be so sure that you actually have the ability to refine pills? For all we know, you could have just stolen that other pill from someone." Kyle was so furious that his face was turning red. The Thompson family members were faced with a dilemma. Although it would be humiliating for Kyle, it shouldn't be a problem for him to kneel down and beg for help if it meant saving Herman Thompson. However, Joseph started to doubt Kevin's skills again because of his son's comments.
"Mr. Williams, please forgive me for asking. Can you really refine pills?"
"It looks like you don't believe me either." Kevin shook his head as he headed for the door. Before he reached the door, Kevin brought out a blood-red pill from his pocket. As he subtly waved it around for everyone to see, a strong fragrance filled the entire room. "Kevin, is that the life prolongation pill?" Do you actually have a refined pill in your hand? Nadia quickly rushed towards Kevin as she wanted to get a closer look. At the same time, both Joseph and Kyle's jaws dropped, and they wore a sorry look on their faces. How is this possible? Kyle couldn't believe what he had just heard. However, Kevin didn't say a word. He casually put the pill back in his pocket and walked out the door as Nadia followed closely behind him and kept asking questions. Suddenly, Joseph stepped in front of Kyle and slapped him hard on the face. "Dad, why did you hit me?" Kyle was confused.
"You deserve much more than that. You are lucky to still be my son right now."
Joseph fumed.
"How could you do such a thing? You knew that pill could save your grandfather's life, but you just had to let your pride get in the way. Now that you've angered him, what do you think we should do?"
Just then, Nadia, whose face was full of excitement, hurriedly walked back into the room.
"Nadia, has Mr. Williams calmed down?" Joseph asked nervously.
"We overheard everything, and Kevin was impressed that you had the courage to scold Kyle in front of the other Thompson family members. He felt like you were being a true son to your own father, so your actions have saved Herman Thompson's life." Nadia slowly opened her palm and showed him the life prolongation pill.
"Should I give it to my father immediately?"
Joseph gratefully asked. "Mr. Williams is waiting for you downstairs, so you should go there now. Rest assured I'll be the one to give this pill to your father." Nadia's heart was filled with admiration for Kevin.
"Thank you."
Joseph straightened his clothes and quickly ran downstairs. Kevin had been sitting quietly on a chair by the grand piano. Joseph tried to calm himself as he slowly walked towards Kevin and greeted him respectfully.
"Mr. Williams."
"We need to talk," Kevin replied with a serious expression.
"Mr. Williams, thank you for saving my father. You also saved the entire Thompson family in the process. We shall be forever grateful for the kindness that you've bestowed upon us."
Joseph was about to shake his hand, however, Kevin immediately stopped him. "Don't be in such a hurry to thank me. Your father isn't completely out of danger yet." Kevin's eyes had been scanning the surroundings as if he was searching for something.
"Why is that? Is there something else wrong with him?"
Joseph was concerned. Kevin sighed faintly. He seemed to want to say something, but was hesitant to speak up.
"If you have something to say, just say it."
Joseph was so anxious that he couldn't stand still. "Well, now that you mention it, has your father been seriously ill for the past 2 months?" Kevin asked with a slight frown.
"Yes. How did you know?"
Joseph asked in surprise. Instead of answering him, Kevin continued. "I'm assuming it started out with him simply having a hard time sleeping, and during those restless nights he had a tendency to talk in his sleep as well. Then when his condition began to worsen, he developed a fever that never went away, causing his head to swell up and his body to shut down into a coma until waking up about half a month ago in a severely weakened state." Joseph was speechless. How had Kevin been able to pinpoint Herman Thompson's symptoms so accurately? He figured that there were only 2 possibilities. Either Kevin was a truly powerful expert with both high herbalist skills and excellent medical skills, or he had been scheming with the Thompson family enemies all along. However, Joseph didn't know which category Kevin belonged to. "Let me ask you one more thing. Have you yourself been waking up from your sleep and feeling restless recently? And from time to time, do you feel like you're having weird, lucid dreams?" Kevin saw how tense Joseph had become, and he sighed helplessly.
"Mr. Williams."
Joseph seemed to have heard something terrifying as he took a few steps back from him. What Kevin said was his secret, and he'd never told anyone that he was currently suffering from the same early symptoms as his father. "I think I now know the root of your and your father's illness. Thankfully, I believe that some Harmony pills should solve the problem," Kevin exclaimed.
"Harmony pills?"
Joseph was stunned. He'd never heard of this type of medication before. And what problem did he and Herman Thompson have? When Joseph thanked Kevin for saving his father by giving him the life prolongation pill, Kevin warned him that Herman Thompson wasn't completely out of danger yet. After accurately pinpointing the symptoms that both Herman and Joseph were experiencing, Kevin thought he'd figured out the root cause of their illness, which he believed that a Harmony pill would address. "To confirm if I'm right, I have one last question. Have the two of you ever tried the life prolongation pill before? Kevin looked Joseph in the eye.
My father and I have both taken an experimental version of the life prolongation pill that the Herbalist Society was developing about 2 months apart from each other. To tell you the truth, Nadia actually advised us not to take them since they might have some side effects. But we were so excited about the prospect of gaining a new edge over our enemies that we were willing to take the risk,
Joseph admitted. Just as I thought. The life prolongation pill can be quite tricky to refine. While both the renewal grass and heavenly flower herbs are safe ingredients on their own, even the slightest error when mixing dosages of the two can cause unintended side effects. And this is precisely why you and your father have been experiencing the symptoms that I mentioned. If left untreated, I'm afraid that you might end up just like him in about 2 months' time. Kevin sighed as he nodded his head. Joseph was stunned when he heard what Kevin said.
You did mention that you had something that could cure us, didn't you?
As the name suggests, the Harmony pill works to eliminate potent toxins and restore natural balance within your body. Luckily, I happen to have a couple with me, so taking one each should be able to cure both of you completely. Kevin smiled as he handed Joseph 2 lavender-colored pills. Joseph was at a loss for words.
Mr. Williams, I can't thank you enough.
Kevin waved his hand and didn't let him continue. I'm just glad that I was able to find the root of your illness and come up with a solution. Anyway, I can't stay here for long as I still have something to deal with. If you guys need anything else, just come to Chicago and look for me. Joseph nodded in understanding and immediately sent for his men to arrange for Kevin's helicopter ride back to Chicago. He then told Kevin that Nadia would stay behind to monitor his and Herman Thompson's condition. As for the life prolongation pill, Kevin made sure that he brought back the renewal grass and heavenly flower herbs that they bought at the Pearl family auction. With these, he could finally learn how to refine the life prolongation pill when he got back home. After all, the one that was given to Herman Thompson had actually been refined by the Night King, and he had kept it in his pocket in case of an emergency. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Lily was still at home, sitting anxiously on the couch. Kevin had yet to reply to any of her messages, so she was really worried that something bad had happened to her husband. Suddenly, there was a hurried knock on the door. Dorothy immediately went out to the kitchen and walked toward the door to answer it.
Who is it? And why are you knocking when there's a doorbell? If I see any damage on this door, you're going to pay for it.
Dorothy's face fell when she opened the door. Grandma Jones, whom she had not seen for a long time, was standing there with her head slightly lowered. Next to her was Jason Jones, and more than a dozen members of the Jones family were standing behind them.
What are you doing here?
Dorothy asked in confusion. She knew that the rest of the Jones family would never come to their house for no reason, so she could tell that something wasn't right with their unexpected arrival.
Dorothy, is Lily home?
Grandma Jones asked with a smile.
Why are you looking for her? Is it because of the shares again?
Dorothy's face turned bitter and she pursed her lips.
Those shares belong to my daughter. No one will be able to take them away from her. Dorothy, what are you talking about? The reason why we came here today is because we all just wanted to see how the two of you are doing. Why don't you welcome us in?
Grandma Jones' tone was very gentle, as if she wasn't angry at Dorothy's accusations at all. This was something that had never happened before. Who is it? Lily got up from the couch and walked over to them, and when she saw who it was, she also asked in surprise, Grandma Jones, why are you here? A few minutes later, Grandma Jones was sitting on the couch, while Jason and the rest of the Jones family members stood by her side. Grandma Jones, what brings you here this time? Lily asked in confusion. Grandma Jones looked at her granddaughter and sighed deeply.
Lily, we're family after all, aren't we? Now, can you please ask Kevin to save the Jones family?
Recently, the Jones family's business had been facing some struggles. Although it was no longer on the verge of bankruptcy like before, it wasn't exactly flourishing either. Their business partners, who had been very respectful towards the Jones family in the past, were now taking advantage of their relationship for their own selfish interests. making them feel like they were being bullied into a corner as a result. When they heard this, Lily and Dorothy looked at each other with some doubt in their hearts. Were they telling the truth? And of all people, why were they looking for Kevin to help them?
Did I hear you wrong? You want Kevin to save the Jones family? What can that piece of trash do?
Dorothy asked in surprise. That's right, Grandma Jones. What exactly is going on? Lily asked in confusion.
Why are you two acting so cold towards us today? Lily, you grew up under the care of the Jones family, and our family has treated Kevin well these past few years, Grandma Jones tried to explain.
Grandma Jones has personally come here to humbly ask for your help today. What else do you two want?
Jason sneered. His eyes were filled with extreme unwillingness. However, he knew that they had no choice but to be here. Jason, what do you mean? Can you explain the situation more clearly? Lily didn't want to waste any more time talking to him.
What are you guys still pretending for? How long were you planning to hide the fact that Kevin is the president of Williams Media from us?
Jason was beginning to lose his composure. Wait, what? Lily and Dorothy stood up in surprise at the same time. The Jones family members were getting impatient, and a trace of displeasure flashed across Grandma Jones's face. Jason, stop trying to mess with me, Lily said with a distraught look on her face. If you're here just to make fun of me, then I'll have to ask everyone to leave immediately. Although our family isn't very rich, we won't tolerate you bullying us like this.
Lily, I have to say that I really underestimated you. You actually quietly got close to a real big shot.
Jason shook his head in disbelief.
And that Kevin is pretty devious. He's been living and eating off the Jones family for so long under the guise that he's just a freeloading lowlife. And now he's returning our kindness with ingratitude? He may be rich, but he's still a useless son-in-law as far as we're concerned.
It's not April Fool's Day today, is it? Jason, what are you saying all this nonsense for? Although Lily said this out loud, deep down it made her think. The last time she saw Kevin, his body and demeanor seemed to have changed. Was there any truth to what Jason was telling her? Jason was about to say something else, but he was stopped by Grandma Jones. She took a long, hard look at Lily and her mother. Jason is telling the truth. Kevin is indeed the CEO of Williams Media. Although Grandma Jones was reluctant to admit it, he had something that she badly wanted. Mom, your joke isn't funny at all. Kevin is a useless person. If he's the president of Williams Media, then I'm the richest mother-in-law in Chicago. Dorothy didn't even believe half of what she just said. Just a few days ago, she'd scolded Kevin and driven him out of the house to look for the Night Gang, and until now he hadn't come back. How could that useless piece of trash be the president of Williams Media?
All right, we've had enough of this stupid act of yours. The next time you see Kevin, tell him that he must take out half of his Williams Media shares and give them to the Jones family. It's the least he can do to repay all the kindness our family has shown him over the past few years,
Jason flatly demanded. No one would have thought that when Jason said this, his heart would be filled with pain. After all, who knew that the man he had been casually bullying and mocking this entire time would turn out to be so powerful? He shuddered at the thought of having to beg for his mercy one day, knowing that Kevin wouldn't forgive him that easily. Grandma Jones then spoke up once again. Lily, I know that you're a kind-hearted person. I'm sure you also can't bear to see our family struggling like this. Isn't that so? Look at your relatives standing here in front of you. Don't tell me that you want to see them sleep on the streets one day. Lily replied, Grandma Jones, I think this matter... Grandma Jones didn't let her finish and continued. I know that Williams Media belongs to Kevin, but he can rest assured that I won't ask him to hand over his shares for nothing. When the Jones family becomes successful once again, we'll never forget his contribution during our time of need. Mom, I really think you've confused Kevin with someone else. How could that useless son-in-law of mine be the president of the Williams Media when he lived off my daughter's money for the past 3 years? Dorothy had no idea why Grandma Jones kept insisting this absurd story was true. Was her age finally getting to her? Grandma Jones, with all due respect, I don't think what you're saying is possible. Kevin is still working for someone else's company.
Lily lowered her head and looked down at the floor. As far as she knew, although Kevin did have some money on hand, it was surely nothing compared to what the president of Williams Media would have. Lily had begun to feel like she was having the weirdest day of her life. All of this nonsense was truly stranger than fiction. Was she having a bad dream or something? If only Kevin were there to set things straight. Grandma Jones, Jason, and some other Jones family members had paid a visit to Lily and Dorothy's home. After finding out that Kevin was the president of Williams Media, Grandma Jones wanted him to save their struggling family business as repayment for years of being a useless son-in-law to them. However, since Lily and Dorothy still weren't aware of Kevin's true identity, they kept thinking that the Jones family was just mocking them the entire time. Feeling like this was the weirdest day of her life, Lily was wondering if she was stuck in a bad dream.
In what reality would Kevin be the president of Williams Media? This has been fun and all, but I think it's best if you all leave right now. Besides, it's getting late and I can't cook for so many people.
Dorothy didn't want to waste any more time dealing with the Jones family.
Grandma Jones, we appreciate you coming all the way to visit us here, but Mom's right. If you have nothing else to say to us, it's time for you to go.
Lily gestured for the door. Although both Dorothy and Lily were very straightforward with their words, the Jones family had taken this the wrong way. With such a rich and powerful husband, it seemed to them like Lily was no longer looking out for the family's best interests. Grandma Jones's breathing became rapid, and her body began to tremble due to anger.
The two of you really have no conscience. Are you so successful now that you can afford to abandon your family? Lily, how can you dare to do such a terrible thing to our family?
Grandma, didn't I tell you long ago that Lily is an ingrate? Do you finally believe me now?
Jason sneered as he tried to comfort Grandma Jones. Lily sighed and didn't know what to say anymore. On the other hand, Dorothy didn't want to bother with them anymore and walked back into the kitchen. Lily stammered,
Grandma Jones,
No need to say another word. Today's matter is settled. Kevin must hand over Williams Media to the Jones family. He's lied to us for too long, and this is the only way that he can make up for it.
Grandma Jones forcefully interrupted her.
Lily, don't tell me you still don't know Kevin's true identity.
Jason suddenly seemed to have thought of this possibility. Why don't you go out and ask around? Who doesn't know about how the useless son-in-law of the Jones family is actually the CEO of Williams Media? Everyone in Chicago is calling our family blind for being completely oblivious to it. What he said wasn't wrong. After all, the news of the Power Pill auction and what happened in the Salix Leaf Hotel had spread across the entire city. Kevin's identity was no longer a secret.
So, is it really true?
Lily's small face instantly turned pale. Overhearing this, Dorothy rushed out of the kitchen and excitedly grabbed Jason's shoulders.
You're not lying, are you? Can you repeat what you just said?
Surprised by this, Jason sighed and repeated,
Kevin is the one and only CEO of Williams Media. Everyone in Chicago already knows this fact by now.
Oh my God, that useless son-in-law has been pretending to be poor in front of me all this time? I've always been so good to him.
Dorothy stumbled a few steps back before leaning against the wall. No matter how the people of the Jones family looked at her, they all felt that she was crying tears of joy at the moment. Lily was trying her best to stay calm.
Kevin hasn't come home for a few days. We should wait for him to come back first before we discuss this matter.
Unless Kevin would personally admit this to her face, she still wouldn't believe it no matter what. Grandma Jones and Jason looked at each other, unable to react to the situation in front of them.
It's fine if he's not here. Your place is big enough anyway, so it won't be a problem for Grandma and me to stay here for a few days.
Jason casually sat down on the couch. He then put his feet up on the coffee table and said arrogantly,
What are you waiting for, Lily? Go and get me a glass of soda.
Jason had already made up his mind. As soon as Kevin came back, he would make him hand over Williams Media no matter what. Once that happened, everything would become his, instantly turning him into Chicago's newest rising star.
As he imagined all the beautiful possibilities in the future, Jason couldn't help but drool at the thought of it. Meanwhile, Thomas Williams was sitting in the study room of the Williams family mansion in New York, reading through all of the information he just collected. Williams Media had sold over 100 power pills just a few days before. Although the Williams family was currently training their strength with the secret help of the Union, their overall strength wasn't increasing very quickly. What if he could obtain the power pill recipe for himself? Thomas suddenly smiled bitterly when he thought of this. Now that the relationship between Kevin and his family was so tense, how could he be willing to come back? "Why do you look so pale and gloomy?" Laura Williams walked in aggressively. "You're now the Williams family patriarch. You should be beaming with joy."
You can take a look for yourself.
Thomas turned his laptop around as he nursed a headache. Laura was stunned. How is this possible? Where did that piece of trash get so many power pills?
Other than the fact that he knows how to refine medicinal pills, I can't think of any other reason.
Thomas looked at his wife coldly. Deep in his eyes there was a viciousness that couldn't be described with words. "Can't we just send some people to capture Kevin so he can hand his recipe over to us?" Laura's face gradually became serious. Thomas could only sigh when he heard her. It wasn't like they'd never seen Kevin's strength before. Capturing someone as powerful as him would be no easy feat. "If we can't abduct Kevin, how about we go after his wife? As long as we have something that we can use against him, we don't have to worry about getting the power pill recipe," Laura suggested with a smirk. Ever since she started training, she finally understood the benefits of being strong. Rather than just being a pretty face, she would also be feared and respected by others.
Isn't that too much?
Thomas frowned and asked. No matter what, Kevin was still his nephew. It would be too despicable of them to drag his innocent wife into this. What's wrong with that? Kevin was originally a member of the Williams family. You raised him for so many years, and you even gave him Williams Media. Isn't it only natural for that piece of trash to give you something in return? Laura gave her husband a deep look. The Williams family should rise back to the top by any means possible. If that's what it takes to get the job done, then I don't see a problem with it. Thomas remained silent and sighed heavily. Besides, why can't you handle it? Aren't you man enough to fight for the Williams family, let alone your wife? Laura laughed in disdain. Thomas, why did I even marry you? You've become such a waste of a husband that I'm beginning to regret this marriage. What happened to you? Back then, you could even...
Shut up!
Thomas suddenly covered Laura's mouth to keep her quiet. He then looked around cautiously and relaxed a little after not seeing anyone.
You better take those words back,
Thomas said as he took his hand away from her mouth. Laura glanced at him with contempt. Prove yourself first and do as I say. Find someone to capture Lily. When the time comes, Kevin will surely exchange the power pill recipe for her. Thomas tightly clenched his fists. After struggling for a while, he finally made up his mind. He thought to himself,
Kevin, I'm doing this for the sake of the family. You mustn't blame me for what I'm about to do.
At that very moment, a helicopter slowly landed back in Chicago. As Kevin sleepily got out of it, he suddenly received a phone call from Nadia. Hey, I just got back. What's up? Kevin stretched his arms comfortably. That's good to know. Now, don't forget what I told you, Nadia said reluctantly. Kevin almost got a headache when she mentioned it. Back at the Thompson family mansion, Nadia immediately followed him right after seeing the life prolongation pill in Kevin's hand. Thinking that he was the one who had refined the pill, she actually wanted to learn herbalism under him. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Kevin then ended the call and immediately went back to Williams Media. Upon arriving at his office, he called Mitchell Cook and the others over to tell them in detail about going to Detroit, as well as his subsequent plans for Chicago. Then he dropped by Corwin Tower to refine dozens of power pills, as he figured that these would come in handy in case of an emergency. When Kevin was done with that, he finally returned home to Lily. But as soon as he entered the apartment, he was completely stunned to find Jason leisurely lying on the couch as if the place belonged to him. Kevin could tell that something had happened between Lily and the Jones family in his absence.
Looks like CEO Williams has finally returned home. Jason glanced at him lightly. There's no need to act so formally around me. Why don't you sit beside me on the couch?
Where's my wife? Kevin didn't even bother to look at him.
She's talking with Grandma upstairs. Jason crossed his legs and smiled. Kevin, I must admit that you're really good at hiding things. I can't believe you managed to conceal your identity as the president of Williams Media from us for so long.
Upon hearing this, Kevin sighed. He just wanted to go to Lily right now.
To be honest, this is actually a good thing. Since everyone is already used to you being such a useless person, you should just hand over the company to us. Jason sneered.
Kevin was almost angered by these words as he shook his head and started walking upstairs.
Hey, I'm still talking to you. Didn't you hear what I just said?
Jason suddenly stood up from the couch.
Stop right there, you piece of trash.
You seem to be mistaken about one thing. This is our home. If you yell at me like that again, I can kick you out. Kevin glanced at him indifferently. Jason really didn't know when to shut up sometimes.
You got guts, Kevin. Seems that you've gained a lot of confidence now that your secret's been exposed to the public. But don't think that you can turn the tables around for long just because you have Williams Media. Now that you've had some fun in the limelight, it's time to hand over the company and let the Jones family manage it. After all, you owe us big time for being a useless son-in-law all these years, Jason demanded.
In his mind, Jason already had everything planned out. As soon as he got the company, he would host a huge party and invite all the influential people in Chicago to celebrate his arrival. After Kevin finally arrived at home, he was surprised to find Jason lying on the couch. Jason revealed that the Jones family had already found out about his identity as the president of Williams Media, then demanded that he hand over the company to them as repayment for all his years living off them as a useless son-in-law. In his mind, Jason already had plans of throwing a huge party to celebrate Chicago's newest rising star once the company was his. Are you out of your mind? Kevin laughed.
Kevin, if you know what's best for you, just do as I say. Perhaps I'll even let you work as my personal assistant once I become CEO of Williams Media. Come to think of it, I should change its names to Jones Media. Jason was getting arrogant. Besides, what are you going to do about it? You can talk all you want, but you don't have the guts to throw me out of this house.
You don't think I dare? Kevin sneered. Before Jason could react, Kevin grabbed him by the clothes on his back and threw him out of the door like trash. After falling hard on the floor in the hallway, Jason helplessly winced in pain and curled up into a ball. What a waste of time! Kevin dusted off his hands and closed the door. When he turned around, he suddenly saw Lily, Grandma Jones, and Dorothy all coming down from upstairs. It's good that you're all here. What do you want to eat? I'll make it right away. Kevin walked towards the kitchen with a broad smile on his face. However, Lily suddenly stopped him. She stared at Kevin with a confused look on her face. Grandma Jones has something to tell you. If you have something to say, just say it. Kevin didn't have a good impression of Grandma Jones, knowing that she never liked him and how she always made Lily's life difficult. Kevin, I get why you're being so cold to me right now. It's all my fault. I never showed much concern for you in the past, but you also have to understand where I was coming from. I did that to give you the motivation to fight. Grandma Jones slowly sat down on the couch. Am I supposed to thank you for that? Kevin shook his head helplessly. His sarcastic reaction made the smile on Grandma Jones's face disappear. Kevin, look at you. You've been married to Lily for a few years already, and yet you still don't have a child. When are you going to have one? I can't wait to have a great-grandchild. Where are you going with this, Grandma Jones? Kevin raised his eyebrows slightly as he tried to play along. Based on what Jason said earlier, he already figured why Grandma Jones was acting this way right now. He thought to himself, the Jones family must be daydreaming again if they think they'll get my company. Kevin, I know you've been busy with your company's business and don't have much time to spend with Lily, but while I think that it's important to make money, family should always come first. Grandma Jones felt that her words were reasonable, so she didn't even pause for a moment and continued. Thankfully, I've thought of a great solution. Why don't you leave Williams Media to the Jones family so you can have more time to spend with Lily? That way, the two of you can finally focus on consummating your marriage and not delay the joy of being parents because of other things. Kevin looked at Lily and found that her face had gone red from embarrassment, while Dorothy seemed to have other thoughts in her mind as she avoided everyone's gaze. Kevin, for everyone's best interest, you need to leave the company for the Jones family to manage it. After you have a child with Lily, we will surely return Williams Media to you. This way, your family and career won't be in conflict with each other. Everything Grandma Jones said seemed to be logical. Grandma Jones, are you feeling unwell? Kevin asked plainly. Although Kevin didn't know how she found out about his identity, he knew one thing. The Jones family wanted to get his company for free, and he had absolutely no plans of letting that happen. Did Grandma Jones think that he would be that simple and easy to deceive? What are you saying? I'm just thinking about you and Lily, Grandma Jones said unhappily. If you're not in good health, you should go to the hospital for a checkup. Coincidentally, I know a very good doctor who can totally help you, Kevin subtly teased. Kevin, what do you mean? Grandma Jones's face twisted up. She was so distraught. She was determined to get Williams Media today. And for the sake of the Jones family's future, Grandma Jones was willing to use underhanded tactics just to get what she wanted. What she didn't know, though, was that, thanks to Jason, Kevin had already seen through her act even before she started talking. Grandma Jones, do you really think I'm that stupid? Williams Media is mine. Why should I give it to the Jones family? Besides, you don't have to worry about my wife and me. So while we appreciate your concern, you can just go back to taking care of your own matters from now on. Kevin crossed his arms and leaned against the wall. One had to admit that the Jones family's eyes were bigger than their stomach. It was just that they didn't have the ability to carry out any of their ambitious plans. Kevin, how dare you? Don't think that you're so amazing just because you're in charge of Williams Media. No matter what, I'm still your grandmother. How can you speak to me with such an attitude? Grandma Jones could no longer hold it in. Besides, Williams Media is such a big company. How can you manage it well? You're just a useless son-in-law of the Jones family. Instead of letting it slowly burn to the ground in your hands, why don't you let us manage it? Think of it as you returning the favor for all those years that you lived off our money. She originally wanted to have a proper discussion with Kevin, but she didn't expect him to be so ungrateful. Grandma Jones, out of respect, I'm trying my best not to laugh my head off here, Kevin sneered. Please don't use your morals to trick me. I'm not falling for that insincere shtick of yours. Grandma Jones was seething at this point. Up until now, she thought she'd done such a good job convincing Kevin that she was doing this for his sake and not hers. Let me make this clear. Williams Media is mine. Even if it goes bankrupt tomorrow, it's still my company. What does it have to do with the Jones family? Kevin shook his head in disappointment. Besides, I've already repaid the so-called kindness of the Jones family. Do you really think that your family has relied on its own strength to survive since the last time Tyler Dawn came to your mansion? Grandma Jones slammed her hand hard on the coffee table. That's enough. You have no reason to object to this matter. Williams Media must be handed over to the Jones family immediately, Grandma Jones demanded. In her eyes, Williams Media was like a box of deep-dish pizza that had been delivered right to her doorstep. There was absolutely no reason for her not to eat it. Even just a slice of its shares would catapult the Jones family's power and influence in Chicago. Do you want to take it by force? Be my guest. That'll depend on whether the Jones family has the ability or not. Kevin's eyes turned cold. He really wanted to ask Grandma Jones about one thing. What was this kindness that she kept harping about? Didn't the Jones family treat him like trash before? Could she really be suffering from dementia? Suddenly, the door was kicked open by someone. Jason, who was still doubled over in pain, slowly limped in.
Kevin, how dare you do that to me? Are you okay, Grandma?
I don't care about anything you said today. You have to give us control of Williams Media right now. Otherwise, you must immediately divorce Lily.
Grandma Jones couldn't sit still, and she stood up from the couch. These words undoubtedly stirred Kevin's nerves. You're now using my wife to threaten me?
So what if I did?
In order to obtain Williams Media, Grandma Jones suddenly couldn't care less about their marriage anymore, as the tense atmosphere in the room had instantly reached its peak. Jason revealed a proud smile. He felt that his grandmother's threat had truly struck a chord with Kevin this time. They both knew that Lily was his weak spot. Lily, do you want me to hand over Williams Media? Kevin suddenly broke the silence.
Well, I do have shares in the Jones family. Kevin, even if you hand the company over to the Jones family, it's actually not a big deal. At the very least, I'll give you my shares if you want them. What's mine is yours,
Lily said without even daring to raise her head to look him in the eye.
Why should you give it to him? Don't be stupid, Lily. Do you still not know what kind of person Kevin is? This piece of trash is nothing without that company. When he hands over Williams Media, you can kick him out of the house and find a better husband.
Dorothy couldn't help but stick her nose in. She had thought very clearly about this. Since her daughter was also part of the Jones family, they would benefit from the situation either way, with the added bonus of getting rid of Kevin if they were to obtain Williams Media from him. In any case, she'd hit the jackpot, and she would be able to live the extravagant lifestyle that she had always imagined for the rest of her life. I really can't believe you guys. I guess some things never change. Kevin suddenly laughed. Initially, he thought the people of the Jones family were at most heartless, but now it seemed like they were completely shameless. They still treated him the same way as before.
What are you laughing at?
Grandma Jones coldly reprimanded him.
I've already prepared the equity transfer agreement. If you truly care about Lily, sign it immediately and I can guarantee that I'll give you some allowance to spend every month.
Did you hear that, Kevin? If you sign the agreement, Grandma will make sure to treat you very well. Think about it carefully. By leaving the company to us, you can live a better life and spend every day eating free food. Furthermore, you don't need to worry about anything since the Jones family will take care of you.
Jason tried to make his case in a much friendlier tone.
Also, as the strength of the Jones family increases, your reputation will also naturally rise, and people outside will no longer think that you're just a useless son-in-law who's not good enough for Lily. It's like killing two birds with one stone.
So how about it, Kevin? Will you sign the agreement or not?
Grandma Jones eagerly asked. Kevin didn't answer her question. He just took out his phone and walked into the kitchen to make a call. Thinking that Kevin had admitted defeat and was calling to inform Williams Media about their agreement, Grandma Jones and Jason couldn't help but feel proud of what they had just pulled off. When the Jones family first received the news of Kevin's identity as president of Williams Media, everyone was incredibly shocked and in disbelief. How could a piece of trash that they could always casually belittle suddenly become richer and more powerful than all of them? How could they endure this shame? This was simply unacceptable. Therefore, Grandma Jones hatched a plan with Jason. She decided she would have to take everything from Kevin's hands no matter what the cost. Kindly summarize all the recent business activities by the Jones family and send it to me in 20 minutes. After saying this, Kevin hung up the phone and went back to the living room. Lily, let's see if you still have any shares left in the Jones family, Kevin said coldly. When they heard this, Lily could immediately sense that something wasn't right as Grandma Jones and Jason's expressions had suddenly changed. Meanwhile, Dorothy just stood there blankly and had no clue about what was going to happen next. When Kevin returned home to see Lily, he was surprised to see Grandma Jones and Jason in the apartment. They were trying to force him to turn over Williams Media to repay them for all that he'd done for them over the years. Of course, Kevin had no intention of doing any such thing. 10 days before all this, another building in Chicago had been bought by the Central Alternative Healing Academy. The purpose of this building was to set up a stronghold for their organization to use in the future. All the people from the 9 remaining major organizations were sitting in the dark room. The Union was notably absent.
It's been a few days and Kevin hasn't brought us the power pill yet. Did he run away and hide?
Jeffrey Bowie said worriedly.
It shouldn't be possible. I just saw his mother-in-law 2 days ago, so I'm sure Kevin hasn't left Chicago yet. If he's in hiding, it should only be temporary.
Paul Vaughn leisurely sipped his espresso.
The power pill is incredibly important to us. It has to be controlled by the 9 great organizations. The Union's elders have broken through to another power level, and the overall strength of the group has increased tremendously. If we can't get the pills, I'm afraid we'll be at a serious disadvantage in the future,
Wayne Ford said with a slight frown on his face.
The Union is just a weak group of women. Once we get the power pill, the 9 schools will be able to eliminate them in an instant,
Jeffrey Bowie said disapprovingly and with more than a hint of sexism. One of the group leaders, who had been silent until that moment, suddenly said,
Actually, Kevin isn't that frightening all by himself. The main reason is that his teacher's power base is too overwhelming, and we don't even know anything about his background.
The entire room instantly fell silent. The Night King's power had them extremely terrified.
Have you forgotten our main purpose in coming to Chicago right now?
A man sitting in the dark corner of the room suddenly spoke up. His words instantly made the faces of everyone there turn serious. The 10 great organizations had come to Chicago together for the ultimate showdown between good and evil. It was like everyone had a great weight sitting on top of them, and they couldn't breathe. As an honorable group, they swore to protect thousands of people with their very lives. They would never allow the evil powers to win and risk the future of the entire world.
The urgent matter at hand is to increase the strength of all the major groups as soon as possible. I believe that if Kevin refuses to hand over the power pill, then we'll have to take drastic measures. For example, we can capture his family and force him to hand over the power pills.
Paul Vaughn's tone was very firm.
This isn't good at all. His methods are too despicable. It's not something that we would normally do if we still wanted to call ourselves honorable,
Jeffrey Bowie said with some hesitation.
I think that approach is wrong. We have to keep our priorities in sight. If Kevin and his family were to be sacrificed to be able to protect the happiness and stability of all living beings in the world, no matter how you look at it, this is the right move to make.
Wayne Ford was very supportive of Paul Vaughn's idea. A few seconds later, all the people in the room nodded their heads in agreement, but they were probably the only ones who knew exactly what they were thinking. 2 older gentlemen stood on the beach, looking out at the water. They had a relaxed and powerful calmness about them. If Kevin had been there, he would have been surprised to find out that one of them was the Night King and the other was Wayne Ford from the Healing Arts School.
I never thought that you would take in a student at your age.
Ford stroked his chin while he spoke thoughtfully.
After experiencing the ups and downs of life, I have a few more years left to conceal my strength and bide my time. The young man has unmatched potential and qualities.
The Night King suddenly paused and slowly raised his head to look up at the clear blue sky.
Kevin is the chosen one. In the future, he'll play a pivotal role in our upcoming battle with the evil forces in the world.
Wayne Ford was genuinely scared of the Night King. They'd known each other for many years, and he knew very well what level the man had attained in his development. For as long as he could remember, the Night King had never spoken like this about anyone.
I can see that you think highly of him,
Wayne Ford said very stoically. He'd only seen Kevin 2 or 3 times. Apart from his development being stronger than that of his peers, Wayne Ford hadn't noticed any other distinguishing characteristics.
I know what you're thinking.
The Night King turned his head and stared at him.
Please, believe me. As long as we can help him to fully mature, he'll definitely make the difference in the upcoming battle. But he won't succeed if he chooses the wrong side.
Then he added very emphatically,
Kevin is our future.
Wayne Ford didn't argue with him. He just stood there and contemplated the horizon and the future of the good forces in the world. At Lily's apartment in the Salix Leaf complex, Kevin handed his wife the documents that Tyler Dawn had sent over. "Take a good look. These are all the things your good grandma has done behind your back." Grandma Jones and Jason sat on the sofa looking very frightened and timid. Especially when they felt the anger coming from Kevin, they didn't dare to move a muscle. After spending a couple of minutes reading the documents, Lily threw them hard onto the table and her body trembled violently. When she converted her liquid assets into shares, the Jones family had actually bought all the shares she owned in the KWTD Corporation without notifying her. Then they used the profits they had obtained to fill the gaps in the Jones family's finances. In other words, Lily was completely out of money now.
How could you do this?" Dorothy's face was full of anger. "Mom, Lily and I are both members of the Jones family. How can you treat us like this? You've absolutely ruined us."
Feeling Kevin's pressure, Jason Jones didn't dare to speak. His legs began to shake.
"Lily, you have to understand. I didn't have any other options."
Grandma Jones sighed deeply. About a week before, she'd invested all the family's money into a project, but when it was halfway through, the sources of capital dried up. Helplessly, she could only listen to Jason's suggestion and buy Lily's shares to ensure that the project wouldn't fail. That was why they kept trying to snatch the Williams Company from Kevin. Otherwise, the Jones family would really be finished. "Well, Lily, do you still want me to give the Williams Company to the Jones family?" Kevin asked plainly.
"Honey, I'm sorry."
Tears fell from Lily's eyes as she replied. She just hugged Kevin and buried her head into his chest. All of her money was gone. She had once again been cheated by her family. Suddenly, Jason had no idea where he got his courage from. He pointed at Kevin and roared, "You caused all these problems, you piece of trash. Williams Media is such a big company. You could easily have given us some projects if you'd wanted to. Then our family wouldn't have ended up like this."
"That's right. Kevin, this is all your fault, you piece of trash. If it wasn't for you, how could Lily's money have been taken away from her? Get the hell out of here right now."
Dorothy was so excited that she couldn't think straight. She started pushing Kevin toward the door. "I didn't give the Jones family a chance? You have the nerve to repeat Jason's nonsense?" Kevin said with a cold smile. "Yes, I concealed the truth from you. But in fact, I was the one who asked Tyler Dawn to invest in your family's business. I also asked Brittany Davis to give the contract to my wife." Then Kevin laid out the facts for them to consider. But what did you, Jason Jones, do in return? He tampered with Brittany Davis's equipment, conspired with Grandma Jones to steal Lily's shares, and then expelled her from the family. After that, he cheated her out of her money. I gave you more than one chance. If you blew it, you can only blame yourselves. And now you want to use my wife against me? Attempting to attack the Williams Company is just wishful thinking. Kevin continued to lay into them. There are some things that I didn't want to tell you. It's just that I didn't want to argue with you people. But it doesn't mean that I'm a fool who can easily be bullied. You all keep saying that you want me to return the favor to the Jones family. But during the few years that Lily and I have been married, how did you guys treat me? Don't you have any idea what jerks you've been? Kevin really let them have it. Compared to all the crap you've done, my greatest gift was to let the Jones family continue to exist in Chicago. Kevin still had a lot of things left to do, and he still had to save Phoebe. He didn't want to be delayed any longer by the Jones family's trivial problems. Instead of wasting time beating around the bush, he decided to tell them exactly what he thought. Tyler Dawn looked at Jason and Grandma Jones with contempt. If Kevin gave the word, he wouldn't mind letting the Jones family disappear immediately, and he could easily arrange for it.
"Honey, don't be angry. Take me away. I don't want to be involved with the Jones family anymore."
Lily slowly raised her head and spoke to him quietly with tears welling up in her eyes. "Okay, I'll get you out of here right away." Kevin tenderly wiped the tears from Lily's cheeks. He held her hand and quickly left the apartment along with Tyler Dawn. Dorothy was still in a daze. It turned out that her useless son-in-law that she had looked down on had actually done countless things for the family, and she'd never known about any of it.
Kevin, do you need me?
Before Tyler Dawn could finish what he was saying, Kevin waved his hand to stop him. It's only the Jones family. There is no need for us to waste our time and effort. What you need to do now is to make a trip to Detroit. I'll give you the details later tonight.
Detroit?
Tyler Dawn was stunned for a moment. Then he quickly reacted. He excitedly asked,
Kevin, are you finally going to take the first step?
Yes, it's time. After Kevin finished explaining, he and Lily got into the Pagani Roadster and they drove away in a cloud of dust. In their apartment at the Salix Leaf Complex, Alan and Susan Williams were sitting on the sofa chatting with a middle-aged man. All three of them looked very happy to be together.
Alan, you've really raised a good son. Kevin is very young, but not only has he been enormously successful in his career, his personal development has reached an incredible level. I think it will only take him a few years, and he will definitely become a force to be reckoned with.
The man complimented them as he let out a sigh. The man's name was Richard Swinton. He'd been Alan Williams' closest friend for many years, and he was also the current head of the Swinton family. Richard, don't be too modest. Your daughter Brenda isn't bad either. Alan was very happy. It had been a long time since they'd had a chance to get together.
Now, Alan, don't forget the arrangement we made. Our children are old enough now, it's time for them to meet.
Richard reminded him as he sipped his coffee. Alan's eyes grew wide and he almost choked on his croissant. He'd obviously forgotten about that. Alan Williams and his old friend Richard Swinton were sitting in the living room having a coffee when Richard reminded him that many years ago they'd agreed to arrange a marriage between their children. The expression on Alan's face changed from happiness to deep concern. He and his wife Susan looked at each other, not knowing what to say.
What's wrong? Did you forget that we promised that Kevin and Brenda would be married when they grew up?
Richard could sense that something was wrong. After a few minutes of silence, Alan let out a long sigh. Richard, I have to be honest with you. This is all my fault. Kevin has been married for almost 3 years now. To his and Susan's surprise, their friend didn't show any reaction after hearing this news.
That's okay, buddy.
Richard smiled and waved his hand like it wasn't a problem at all.
A man doesn't have to limit himself to just one woman. And Kevin is such an outstanding young man. I'm sure that any young woman would be happy to be with him.
Alan and Susan secretly sighed in relief. That's very understanding of you, my friend. I'm not sure what to say now. Alan smiled with relief, not knowing how to express the complicated emotions he was feeling.
There's nothing to worry about, Alan. Since Kevin is already married, well, I have 2 daughters who don't have any children. If it's okay with you, I'll consider Kevin to be my adopted son, Richard replied generously.
It's your good fortune that Brad chose you, Alan said with a laugh. The 2 older gentlemen spent a long time chatting and catching up with each other. Kevin parked the car right in front of the apartment building to let the valets take it to the garage. Seeing Lily sleeping so soundly in her seat, Kevin couldn't bear to wake her up. Leave the Jones family and come with me. You made an enormous decision today, didn't you? Kevin thought to himself. He reached out and touched Lily's hair. He got out of the car slowly and carried Lily to the elevator and up to the condo. He placed her gently on the bed and placed his hand on her to give her some spiritual energy so that she could have a better rest. After that, Kevin left a note for her, changed into a new set of clothes, and headed back out. On the way out the door, his phone vibrated.
Hi, Mr. Williams. I'm calling to let you know that Mitchell Cook and the others are here with me at my place,
Tyler Dawn said respectfully over the phone. I'll be right there. Kevin slowly raised his head and looked up at the dim sky. His eyes were actually twinkling. After so many years, they were finally going to embark on their journey. Half an hour later, just as Kevin stepped into the meeting room, the few people who were chatting happily suddenly stood up to greet him.
Mr. Williams,
Mitchell Cook and the others called out respectfully. "We're friends here. No need to be so formal. Just sit down and talk." Kevin waved his hand and looked at Tyler Dawn. He continued, "Have you finished the things I asked you to prepare?"
"Everything is ready."
Tyler Dawn picked up the remote control and pressed a button. The room immediately turned dark and an enormous screen appeared on the wall. The image that was displayed was a detailed chart filled with names along with lines showing their relationships. The two main colors were red and blue.
"This is the current distribution of power in Chicago. I don't know what the reason is, but about a month ago, a lot of powerful people began gathering here, and the most outstanding ones belong to the 10 major schools," Tyler explained. "Their gathering has greatly affected Dominic, Archer, Drake, and even the Steele family."
Tyler Dawn pressed the button again, and lots of blue areas appeared on the screen.
"These are the methods I use to invest in Chicago. I began with the most powerful families in the region."
Mitchell Cook and the others' eyes lit up when they saw what was happening. They were all outstanding business people, so they could naturally tell what was going on. What Tyler Dawn had stumbled upon was actually the backbone of the business forces in the whole Chicago area. Kevin nodded slightly and broke the silence in the room. "Here's the problem that we are facing. How do we control the main powers in Chicago? How should we implement the step that we are about to take?" Tyler Dawn and the others frowned and nodded their heads. Kevin's words hit the nail on the head.
"The Butler family."
Mitchell Cook hesitated for a moment before he added,
"According to the information I received, the Butler family has been in close contact with the Hayes family in Detroit recently."
When they heard this, everyone subconsciously looked at Kevin. After all, the Butler family's heir apparent, Doug Butler, was still lying in the hospital. Using the Butler family to establish a foothold? Kevin fell into deep thought. That's a good idea, but how do we do it?
"Mr. Williams, you might not know this, but the Butler family is preparing to collaborate with the Hayes family to set up a new energy company in Chicago."
Mitchell Cook answered hesitantly as he tried to recall the details. All of them were good at business, but they didn't know much about the new energy industry, so they were a little out of their element. "You've been putting pressure on the Butler's family's businesses for the past few days. Try your best to draw the Hayes family's attention to me." Kevin's intent showed in his eyes. It just so happened that he was going to Detroit to save Phoebe from a horrible marriage. Wasn't the Hayes family planning to celebrate the happy occasion? Then he could give her a really big gift. When Kevin left Tyler Dawn's mansion, it was already past 8 o'clock in the evening. Just as he was about to go back and see Lily, he received a call from his father. "What happened, Dad?" Kevin asked nervously. He knew that his parents would only call him if they had a serious problem. "Do you have any free time now? Come over here right away." Alan Williams sounded a little anxious. "Okay, I'll be right there." When it came to his parents, Kevin didn't waste time asking any questions. He quickly drove over to their condo at the Salix Leaf Complex. Half an hour later, Kevin parked his car in front of the building and looked up at his parents' window. He could see that there wasn't a single light switched on in their place. Could it be that something happened to Mom and Dad? Kevin was a little impatient to find out what was going on. When he got upstairs and opened the door, Kevin quickly retreated. He clearly felt a strong wind blowing toward him. After that, a dark shadow slowly walked out of the living room. "Who are you?" Kevin asked cautiously. "What happened to my parents?"
"If you want to save your parents, you have to strike me first."
"You're asking for trouble." Kevin narrowed his eyes and the internal energy in his body burst out. He shot towards the man like a cannonball. His fists moved like lightning, and Kevin didn't care what he did to this person. He just wanted to find out where his parents were. However, the man easily blocked his aggressive punch.
"Too slow."
This man casually flicked his wrist and sent Kevin flying backwards. However, he didn't injure Kevin at all. After he stabilized himself, Kevin took a deep breath. It was obvious that the man hadn't used his full power, which was certainly immeasurable. "Who are you exactly? Have I offended you in some way? What have you done with my parents? They're just ordinary people and they're not involved in any of the power struggles going on in the city." I think you should understand that they're not a threat to anyone, Kevin explained very honestly.
Kid, you didn't offend me, but I just can't help it. I don't like the way you looked at me,
the man replied in a flat tone. The whole time this was going on, the man never left the shadows, which made it impossible for Kevin to see his face clearly. What the hell? What kind of explanation is that? You attacked my parents for no reason at all? Kevin thought to himself. This was very confusing. Kevin knew that he could be thick-skinned, but now he'd met someone who was even more cold-blooded than he was. Kevin reached into his jacket and pulled out the night dagger. In the next second, he moved so fast that he seemed to disappear from where he was standing and then reappeared right in front of the Shadow Man as he slashed down at him.
Stop it, young man. If you continue fighting like this, you'll bring the destruction of this entire family.
The Shadow Man suddenly became nervous. He waved both of his hands and centered himself calmly in front of Kevin. You don't want to fight? Then what do you want from me? Kevin asked as he took a step back and lowered his weapon.
I want you to be my son. As long as you're willing to agree, your parents won't...
He started to explain hesitantly. That's impossible. Are you threatening my family? Don't even think about it. Kevin forcefully interrupted the man before he could finish what he was saying. Even if you beat me to death, I won't become your son.
Is it really impossible?
The Shadow Man replied jokingly. Absolutely impossible. Not a chance. Kevin looked at him curiously. Deep down inside, he felt that this was a really strange person. And what a strange thing he was asking for.
When Kevin went to his parents' home to try and find them, he was confronted by a strange, powerful man who was hiding in the shadows. The man said that he wanted to adopt Kevin as his own son. Of course, Kevin refused. As he was trying to figure out what was going on, he heard a familiar voice. And what if I agreed to you becoming his son? The lights in the condo all lit up, and Kevin saw his parents standing in the living room, but there was also a middle-aged man standing by the door. Mom, Dad, are you okay? Kevin asked anxiously. Don't be nervous, Kevin. Richard Swinton is the head of the Swinton family. He's been good friends with your father for many years. His mother quickly walked up to him and looked at her son lovingly as she explained what was going on. Kevin was stunned and couldn't decide how to react. He'd heard about the Swintons. There were many powerful families in the country, but only a few of them were able to earn a nationwide reputation like theirs. For example, the Williams family was only slightly famous in the Chicago area. Compared to the Sutherland family and the Thompson family, they were relatively insignificant. However, the Swinton family was different. It was a superior family with hundreds of years of history. In order to avoid attracting too much attention, they'd hidden themselves from public life long ago. However, whatever the family did always seemed to have far-reaching effects. After listening to his mother recount what had happened, Kevin came back to his senses and couldn't help but think, I never expected Dad to know someone like this. Kevin, your Uncle Richard came here to reminisce about old times with us. He also wants to take you as his foster son, Susan Williams said happily. What are you talking about? Kevin looked at his mother in shock. It turned out that what Richard said to him earlier wasn't some kind of a trick to take advantage of him. He actually meant it. What the hell is this? Hurry up and give your foster father a hug. Alan Williams took on a serious tone that he rarely ever used as he loudly chastised Kevin. How could he dare to disobey his foster father's orders? Kevin took a deep breath and walked over to give Richard a hug. Then he said, I agree to be your foster son. Kevin had already forgotten about what he'd said earlier. He wasn't a fool. From the beginning of the night, he knew that Richard Swinton was at least as powerful as Harley Shepard, and now he knew that the man was in charge of the entire Swinton family. If he had such a powerful backer, Kevin would have much stronger standing when he dealt with other families.
Not bad, Alan. This kid has the same vibe as you did when you were his age.
Swinton happily slapped Kevin on the back.
Come with me to my family's estate tomorrow and meet your foster mother.
Swinton couldn't stop smiling. Although he had a good relationship with Alan Williams, what satisfied him even more was seeing Kevin's potential. He was still young and had such strength. It was impossible to tell how high he could climb in the future. That night, Kevin fell into an unusually deep sleep, probably from a medicinal herb that Richard Swinton had given him. Richard lifted Kevin up off the couch like a father might pick up his sleeping child. He carried Kevin to his limousine, and the young man slept the whole way there. Of course, Kevin didn't even have a chance to let anyone in Chicago know that he would be out of town. Dorothy hadn't slept well the whole night. She stretched a little and then walked downstairs. When she got there, she almost fainted. The living room was packed with people. Everyone in the room was emitting a powerful aura. Paul Vaughn was sitting on the sofa with the other people she'd seen before.
What are you doing in my home? Do you know that you're trespassing on private property? Hurry up and get out of here, or I'll call the police.
Dorothy knew that they hadn't come with good intentions, and her heart was pounding rapidly.
Madam, how many days has it been? I want to ask you why the power pill still isn't in my hands.
As Paul Vaughn said this, he placed a large knife heavily on the table.
You don't need to panic. As long as we get the power pill today, we'll leave without making any trouble,
Jeffrey Bowie said with a nasty look on his face.
On the other hand, if we don't get what we want, we won't leave so easily.
If you want a power pill, you should be talking to Kevin. What does that have to do with me?
Dorothy was so scared that her legs began to feel rubbery.
That trash just came back yesterday, and then he took my daughter away. I have absolutely no idea where he lives.
Does that mean there aren't any power pills left?
Paul Vaughn's eyes were burning with anger, and a powerful energy was emanating from his body. Dorothy was so shocked that she took an awkward step backwards and fell to the floor.
Let me go! I only know how to deal with ordinary people. If Kevin has offended you in any way, you can kill him. Don't ever come to see me again.
Dorothy was petrified with fear. If she had any idea something like this would happen, she would have told Kevin not to leave yesterday.
You're Kevin's mother-in-law. If he isn't at home, then it only makes sense to come looking for you.
Paul Vaughn slowly stood up and gestured to the people who were standing next to him.
As long as you're in my hands, I'm sure that Kevin will be willing to exchange a power pill for your safe return.
When he finished speaking, a few Central Alternative Healing Academy members forcefully lifted Dorothy up from the floor.
No! Let me go! You're breaking the law! Don't you know that? I'm going to sue you!
Dorothy threatened them. Moments later, Dorothy changed from struggling and complaining to begging for mercy.
Please let me go! I really don't know where he is!
Tears kept pouring from her eyes. Now she hated Kevin even more passionately than before. If it wasn't for him, she wouldn't be in this terrifying situation.
Please let me go. If you do, I'll let you have Kevin and do anything you want to him.
Suddenly, Dorothy realized there may be another approach as she quickly said,
Don't you know that Kevin is the CEO of Williams Media? As long as you let me go, I'll make you give him all the money you want.
Unfortunately, Paul Vaughn and the others didn't care about her offer. Was money really that useful to people like them? They already knew that Kevin was the president of Williams Media, but no one dared to touch the company. Even the underground organizations had a code of ethics, and they avoided doing anything that would start a panic among ordinary people. No matter how powerful a group was, it had to make sure it followed certain rules in order to remain underground. On top of that, their reason for looking for Kevin wasn't very honorable in the first place. Perhaps because Dorothy's constant begging for mercy was getting too noisy, but Jeffrey Bowie decided to knock her out with the butt of his knife, and the group of people quickly left the apartment. An hour later, another group of people arrived at the apartment. However, when they saw that the place was empty, they quickly called a number.
All right, I got it. Get out of there immediately,
Thomas Williams ordered as he sat in his study with a solemn expression on his face. What's wrong? Didn't you catch him? Laura glanced at her husband and asked.
No. Kevin made arrangements in advance and moved his wife and mother-in-law out of the place.
The more Thomas thought about it, the angrier he became. He suddenly swept everything off the table and onto the floor. I didn't expect that piece of trash to be so smart, Laura sneered. Then she added, So what should we do now? Thomas tapped his temple in annoyance. He'd planned to get hold of a power pill, but never expected that Kevin would already be so well prepared. Now he couldn't even find Kevin. After thinking for a few minutes, Laura had an idea. She said excitedly, "I think I have a way, but I don't know if you dare try it."
What do you have in mind?
Thomas closed his eyes tightly. He was so angry that his head was starting to hurt. "Isn't that scumbag Kevin hiding right now? If you gather together a few of the most powerful families in the Chicago area and put some pressure on the Williams Company, I bet that he'll show himself. If he doesn't come out of hiding, then you can just finish off Williams Media anyway. After all, it was originally the property of the Williams family. It's time to take it back after handing it over to that scum Kevin for so long. When you're finished, the company will close its doors and Kevin won't have any financial resources. He won't be able to buy medicinal herbs and refined medicinal pills." Laura sneered viciously. Thomas seriously thought about following his wife's advice.
Now that things have come to this, perhaps it's our only option.
Thomas took a deep breath. For the sake of the entire Williams family, he really wanted to kill his nephew. At the Steele family's mansion, Dalton suddenly smashed his phone into pieces.
"The top 10 schools have gone too far this time," Dalton said angrily.
"What's wrong with you, Dalton?" Miranda asked curiously.
"Well, let me tell you what those bastards have done now. A few hours ago, some people from the top 10 schools kidnapped Kevin's mother-in-law. They announced that they were only giving Kevin 10 days to think about it. If he wants his mother-in-law to live, he must exchange the Power Pill's formula for her safe return."
Dalton clenched his fist tightly. "How can this be? Aren't the 10 great schools supposed to be on the side of good? Their methods are too despicable," Miranda said in disbelief.
"They're just trying to gain more power, no matter who they hurt. No way I'll let that happen. I have to tell Kevin and go with him to save her,"
Dalton said as he took Miranda's phone from her hand. Just then, their butler ran into the room in a panic. "You've got some terrible trouble, old great-grandfather."
"What happened to my grandfather?"
Dalton asked as he hurriedly ran upstairs. Kevin's father agreed to let his friend Richard Swinton be Kevin's foster father. That very night, Richard took Kevin with him to his family's mansion outside of St. Louis. Kevin slept the whole way there, and he was so exhausted that he didn't even wake up when they arrived. So he was carried up to one of the bedrooms of the guest house and left there until morning. When Kevin woke up from his deep sleep, it was already past 10 o'clock in the morning. Holy crap! Why did I sleep so long? Kevin jumped out of the bed like a shot. When he saw his surroundings, he was stunned. There were 19th century French paintings and beautiful decorations everywhere he looked. When he saw the bed he'd been sleeping in, his eyes grew wide. The bed frame was made of top-grade mahogany. Where am I? Was I kidnapped? Kevin scratched the back of his head and wondered what had happened. He clearly remembered falling asleep in his parents' living room the night before. Suddenly, a clear and pleasant voice came from outside the door.
"Are you up yet, sleepyhead?"
Richard opened the door and walked in. "Father, where are we?" Kevin asked with a dumbfounded expression. He was very sure that Richard must be a very eccentric person. Otherwise, who in his right mind would kidnap him and leave him in a room with so many valuable treasures?
"This is the Swinton family mansion in St. Louis. Didn't I tell you that I'd bring you here last night?"
Richard explained with a faint smile. Kevin's eyes grew wide when he heard this. St. Louis was the most prosperous city in the whole region, but it was several hours away from Chicago, and Richard actually brought him here fast asleep without anyone noticing? What kind of mysterious abilities did Richard have?
"Don't just stand there staring at me. Your foster mother is waiting for you in the living room of the main house."
After Richard finished speaking, he told Kevin to quickly pack up his things and leave the guest house, which was at the far end of the estate. After walking for about 15 minutes through the yard full of exotic flowers and plants, Kevin finally got to the main building and entered the living room. He really didn't understand why the houses built by these rich people were so big. They had more bathrooms than Midway Airport. As he entered, Kevin noticed that the Swinton family's courtyard was in imitation of an ancient Roman villa.
All the flowers and plants made it a very beautiful and relaxing place to be. When he arrived in the main living room, Kevin looked up in amazement. The room was at least 2 stories high and spread out over at least 3,000 square feet. He was tempted to give Richard a thumbs up and say, "Awesome!" After entering the living room, Kevin saw an elegant-looking woman sitting on a chair and leisurely sipping her morning coffee. Beside her sat 2 beautiful women who looked a bit younger but had similar features. Richard led Kevin across the room and introduced them to each other.
"This is your foster mother, and those are our 2 daughters. The eldest, Brenda, is about the same age as you. Our other daughter, Gail, is your younger sister now."
"Mother," Kevin respectfully greeted the woman. "It's good that you are able to visit with us for a few days. Enjoy our peaceful home. Unfortunately, those poor people in Chicago don't have such a life." Catherine Swinton lightly put down her cup as she glanced at Kevin. Kevin wasn't too pleased to hear her say that, but he was a guest, so he bit his tongue. He could only nod his head to show that he understood. "Hubby, I want you to go with me to the mall. There are a few new styles that just arrived at the shoe store. Let's go and take a look at them together," Catherine said quietly.
"But Kevin just got here, and he's not familiar with the place.
Richard began to protest. "What is there to worry about? As long as he doesn't run around, he won't get lost on the property. Besides, don't we have any household staff here today?" Catherine directly interrupted him. "Are you going to go with me or not?"
Okay, I'll go with you."
Richard turned around and looked at Kevin apologetically.
"Kevin, you can stay here and get to know your 2 younger sisters. If you need anything, just tell them. I'll be back as soon as I can."
Catherine didn't give Kevin any time to answer. She told her 2 daughters she was leaving and then took Richard's hand as she quickly walked out of the living room. She didn't say anything at all to Kevin the whole time. Kevin had grown used to this sort of contempt and disdain over the past few years. On top of that, he could tell that Richard and his wife had some challenges to deal with. Before Kevin could recover from his shock, Brenda suddenly said, "Do you still remember me?" When Kevin saw her face, he was stunned. Wasn't this the beautiful Brenda who hung around with Mackenzie and Penny? "You're actually my foster father's daughter?" Kevin wondered out loud. "Don't tell me you have a problem with that," Brenda said with a smile. At the same time, there was a slight blush on her face. It didn't quite match her demeanor when she saw Kevin. "Sis, how do you know someone like this?" Gail looked at Kevin with disdain as she sized him up. She walked over to him slowly, and then she pinched her nose like he smelled bad and said, "I really don't know what my father likes about you. He actually took you in as his son. This is really a disgrace to our family's reputation." "Gail, don't talk nonsense." Brenda knew Kevin's true identity. The name of the deputy leader of the Myriads alone was enough to make someone want to get on Kevin's good side. "What do you mean, Brenda? I'm not talking nonsense. Look at what he's wearing. How can you even stand his smell?" Gail took a few steps back and deliberately put some distance between herself and Kevin. "Sure, he's kind of cute, but he's nothing like Mr. Huxley, is he?" Gail kept asking. "Sis, are you really going to marry a country bumpkin like him?" Kevin shook his head helplessly. How could she think that someone from Chicago was a country bumpkin? It didn't make much sense, no matter how nice St. Louis was. Then he suddenly realized what Gail had just said. Brenda wanted to marry him? Feeling Kevin's gaze on her, Brenda shyly looked down at the floor. Kevin had no idea what to think about this new development. "You're called Kevin, aren't you? Let me tell you, my sister deserves only the best. Look at yourself. Are you even a match for her?" Gail put her hands on her hips and sneered. "I advise you to give up this idea as soon as possible. She's definitely out of your league. Only a handsome man with a prominent family background like Mr. Huxley would be right for my big sister." Hang on a second. Kevin couldn't figure out what was going on. "When did I say I wanted to marry your sister?" "If you're poor, then forget about it. There's no need to put on an act," Gail said disdainfully. "Don't think that just because you look innocent, I'll see you differently. I know just what kind of game you're playing." "What are you talking about?" Kevin was completely confused by what Gail was saying. "Ha!
I've exposed all your tricks. What else are you pretending about? Gail practically spat on the floor. Just because you're engaged to my sister doesn't mean you can treat me like some kind of fool. What? Kevin was so shocked that he couldn't even respond. And Brenda was so shy that she couldn't even look up at Kevin. She said quietly, Kevin, don't be surprised. We can never go against our parents' wishes. I won't mind as long as you divorce your wife before you marry me. Just then, a cool breeze blew through the room, and it helped Kevin come back to his senses a little. What the hell was going on here? He'd only slept for a short while. When he woke up, he was at the Swinton family's estate, and now he was getting married. It was all too much. And why hadn't he gotten an offer this good 3 years ago? He had feelings for Lily, but the Jones family had just been terrible to deal with. What are you talking about, Brenda? Gail couldn't take it anymore. Kevin, I don't want to see you in my house. Get out of here immediately, do you hear me? Why should I leave? Kevin's face started to turn glum. He hated it when people told him to leave because he'd heard that way too many times in his life. It was your father who brought me here. If he told me to leave, I'd do it immediately. But who do you think you are? What right do you have to make a demand like that? Kevin replied coldly. Of course he was angry. Gail was getting more and more aggressive. If Kevin didn't give her a show of strength, she'd think he was a pushover. I'll show you who I think I am, Gail berated him loudly. Someone, kick this lowlife out right this instant. More than 10 men quickly rushed in at her command and stared at Kevin with a very unfriendly look in their eyes. When Kevin looked around, he was a little surprised to see how powerful and dangerous they were. Most people would have found them frightening, but Kevin wasn't scared at all. At the Swintons' estate, Kevin found out that his new foster sister was actually Brenda, who was a close friend of Fenian Mackenzie. But his other foster sister, Gail, took an instant dislike to him and called for help to have Kevin thrown out of their home. Break his arms and legs, then toss him out in the street. Gail stood there with her hands on her hips looking very arrogant.
Yes, ma'am,
the men replied. These people were the Swinton family's bodyguards, and they obeyed the orders of all the family members. Stop! Brenda hastily walked up to her sister and asked, What are you doing? Kevin only said a few words to you. Sis, you really don't like this poor loser, do you? Gail looked at her sister in surprise. You can't be serious. Thornton Huxley is still waiting for you to say yes to his proposal. Gail became even more anxious now. She shouted at the guards. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and do something. I don't want him to remain here for another second. Don't you dare lift a finger, Brenda warned them all coldly. The two sisters' conflicting orders had put the bodyguards in a difficult position. Dealing with one person at a time wasn't a problem. But what were these two young women trying to do? They couldn't obey both of them at the same time. Brenda, don't worry about it. As long as Father doesn't order it, no one will be able to kick me out of the Swinton family. Kevin broke the silence in the hall with a big grin on his face. He stomped his foot on the floor slightly, and a strong wave of energy was released in an instant. The entire room seemed to shake, and almost a dozen guards fell to the ground. Under the enormous pressure emanating from Kevin's body, their faces turned pale. They knew that Gail was making a serious mistake. However, they had to be on their guard against Kevin, and more importantly, they couldn't let anything happen to the two sisters. You're pretty powerful, aren't you? Gail was shocked and ran to hide behind her sister. Gail, you're my foster father's daughter. I'd never do anything to you, but don't think that I'm easy to bully. Kevin waved his hand forcefully. The bodyguards knew they couldn't defeat Kevin, so they all took a knee to show that they were beaten. Apologize right now. Kevin stared coldly at Gail. No, I don't believe that a loser like you would dare to do anything to me. If you do anything reckless, I'll have my father beat you to death. Although Gail was talking tough, she still kept hiding behind her elder sister. But right now, all she felt toward Kevin was hatred. She would never apologize to him. Kevin, for my sake, let's forget about all this. I apologize to you on behalf of my sister. Brenda wanted to slap the back of Gail's head. She couldn't believe that her sister could be so brainless. Sis, what are you afraid of? This is our home, isn't it? Maybe I'll just call Thornton Huxley over here to teach Kevin a lesson. Gail was feeling overly confident. Brenda let out a heavy sigh. Her younger sister could still be so naive. Just then, a man walked into the room.
What happened? Why are these men all kneeling on the floor?
Gail became excited when she saw who it was. Thornton Huxley, you're a sight for sore eyes. Hurry up and give me a hand. This poor slob has been bullying me. Thornton Huxley was the sole heir to his family's fortune in St. Louis, and he'd been pursuing Brenda for many years. In fact, Brenda went to Chicago so often, not just to relieve her boredom, but in order to avoid being bothered by him. He looked at Kevin, and a hint of disdain immediately appeared in his eyes. Very contemptuously, he sneered.
You've got a lot of guts, kid. How dare you cause trouble for the Swinton family? And what makes you think you can bully my little sister Gail? If you don't apologize to her right this second, there's no way you're walking out of here in one piece.
Thornton, what right do you have to tell me what to do in my own house? This is a private matter. It's Swinton family business. Please leave immediately and don't meddle in other people's affairs. Brenda didn't even want to look in his direction. As expected, Thornton's expression changed when he heard this.
Brenda, what did you just say? Could this guy be your younger brother?
Thornton then carefully looked Kevin up and down. He didn't see anything remarkable about him. On top of that, he'd been in St. Louis for many years, but he'd never heard of Richard having a son.
Could this guy be Richard's illegitimate son?
Thornton wondered. The contempt in his eyes grew even stronger. Although it was inevitable for big families to have some private secrets, nobody ever liked an illegitimate child. After all, it was too damaging to the family's reputation.
If I can get the upper hand with this brat, I might be able to make a good impression on Richard, Thornton thought to himself. What are you talking about, Brenda? Am I an outsider or something? Thornton asked hesitantly.
You're handsome and elegant. As far as I'm concerned, you'd make the perfect brother-in-law. You're definitely not an outsider in this family, Gail quickly asked. Thornton, look at this man. He's so poor, but he actually wants to marry my sister. Do you think he's delusional? Thornton was amused by the first part of Gail's sentence, but the second half really stunned him. It seemed that this kid wasn't Richard's illegitimate son after all, but instead he was a rival for Brenda's affection.
What the hell is wrong with you, you loser? What right do you have to pick a fight with me? Brenda is mine, and don't you forget it. Get as far away from her as you can.
Thornton had really gotten worked up over this. I think you're the one who should get out, Brenda snarled coldly. You don't actually like this guy, do you, Brenda? Thornton asked in surprise. How can someone like him even compare to me? As he said this, Thornton puffed out his chest and raised his chin, trying his best to show his handsome side. I won't allow you to put him down like that. Kevin is my fiancé who is betrothed to me. My father brought him here from Chicago so we can get married. Brenda smiled and held Kevin's arm as she leaned in close to him. When he felt the softness of her body against his own, Kevin was a little taken aback. I hate this guy. Please help me, Brenda whispered into Kevin's ear. However, her actions really upset Thornton. How could she be showing so much affection towards Kevin? After all, Thornton had been chasing after Brenda for years, but he'd never even held her hand. This poor slob suddenly appeared and he actually moved right in on her. It was absolutely unbearable for him. Listen, you bastard. Stay away from my Brenda. Otherwise, I'll chop off your hand. Do you understand me? Thornton was so angry that he was about to lose control. What are you shouting for? You're scaring my fiancé. Kevin gently rubbed the back of Brenda's head and ran his fingers through her hair. Thornton couldn't take it any longer. He fiercely rushed up to Kevin and grabbed him by the collar. Can't you hear what I'm saying? I could have killed you with just one word. Thornton glared at Kevin fiercely. You could see the powerful energy flowing through the man's body. Let go of him. Brenda pushed Thornton away forcefully and yelled, I'm warning you, Kevin is my fiancé. If you try something like this in the future, you'll never be welcome in my home again." Her words hit Thornton like a thunderbolt, and he took a few steps back in shock. Suddenly, someone walked over to them. "Is everyone home right now?" When the people in the room heard her say this, they looked over and saw Nadia Alexander, who was wearing a long lavender dress as she stood there with a red box in her hand. "Madam President," Thornton called out respectfully. 3 years before, Nadia Alexander had been his mentor, and with the help of his family's resources, he had advanced by leaps and bounds in herbalism. He'd gotten very close to qualifying to enter the Herbalist Society. This success had given him the confidence to think that he could marry the Swinton family's elder daughter. "Hello, Madam President," Gail and Brenda called out at the same time. The guards, who were still kneeling on the floor, didn't even dare to raise their heads and look up. Nadia Alexander's title of Herbalist Society branch president had given her a great deal of prestige. No matter who saw her had to treat her with the utmost respect. There were also rumors that she had a close relationship with the leader of the Herbalist Society, so everyone understood that offending her was equivalent to indirectly challenging the Herbalist Society itself. However, Kevin was an exception. "Hello, Brenda and Gail." After saying this, Nadia Alexander finally noticed that Kevin was also there. Her excitement was instantly apparent in her eyes. But she also noticed that Brenda was holding onto Kevin's arm, and they looked like they were a couple. This caused Nadia to become very puzzled. Isn't Kevin already married? And didn't Thornton quite like Brenda? What are the two of them doing together now? Nadia was considering all kinds of possible explanations for this surprising development. But Thornton and the others thought that Nadia was remaining silent because she'd been offended by Kevin's lack of respect. "You fool! Don't you know who is standing right in front of you? Hurry up and greet her properly," Thornton scolded Kevin. What Thornton was really trying to do was to show Brenda how capable he was. After all, he was the branch president's student and would make an ideal husband. "Are you deaf? Didn't you hear what Thornton just told you? This is Nadia Alexander. Can you afford to offend her?" Gail snarled at Kevin. Earlier, Kevin had asked Gail to apologize to him. Now the tables had turned and Kevin would have to say that he was sorry. Gail thought that she had the upper hand now. With Thornton's support, she'd be able to put Kevin in his place. But when she saw that Kevin didn't react for a long time, Brenda became even more anxious. Gail and Thornton finally relaxed a little. Now that Kevin had insulted such a powerful person, his life was probably over. But then, to everyone's surprise, Nadia announced, "Mr. Williams doesn't need to apologize for anything." She would never forget the time when she was visiting the Thompson family. Joseph and Kyle Thompson's attitude towards Kevin was so respectful that they practically treated him like a father figure. Compared to them, what right did she have to make Kevin give her any special treatment? Everyone looked at Kevin in shock because of what Nadia had just said. What was going on here?
"Hi, everyone. We weren't out for long. Why is the house so lively?"
Richard slowly walked in with his wife. Because Catherine wasn't feeling well on the way to the mall, the two of them had decided to turn around and hurry back home. "Mr. Swinton!" Nadia nodded her head slightly as she greeted him. Because of her status, this was the most respect that she'd ever showed to anyone. Richard was pleased to see her, but he had no idea what Nadia was doing in his home.